Chapter 369. In Court. This title was domineering. If it was spread out, it would also sound good. Otherwise, if he called himself the Een Master of the Underworld, he would be inferior to the Heavenly Court in name. How could he compete with him? Since he wanted to compete, then he had to start from the basics. First of all, he could not be weak in terms of reputation. It did not matter if he did not have the strength, but he had to show off his reputation. The name represented the luck of heaven and earth. It could not be taken lightly. This was a magical power that could often play an unexpected role. The future of the primordial world. It will change in my hands. Feng Zichin was a little excited when he thought of the future separation of heaven and earth. If this matter was successful, he would have completed a part of his plan to change the primordial world. The Een Court of the Underworld was a major event that would change the primordial world. The fate of the primordial world would be controlled by him. How could this not be exciting? Anyone in this situation would not be able to remain calm. Moreover, Feng Zichin had also thought of a way to let the Een Court compete with the Heavenly Court. The reason why the Heavenly Court could shock the primordial world was because of Zhouxing, Dijun, Taifushi, and the endless demon race. If the Een Court wanted to compete with him, they could only borrow the power of the Magi. In the primordial world, only the Magi could compete with the demon race and even faintly defeat them. Moreover, there was an inseparable relationship between the Magi and the netherworld. Hutu, that was the lord of Samsara. Her status was even higher than Fengdu, the lord of the netherworld. She was not inferior to a saint at all. She was the true, supreme, karmic position of the world. With him around, the Magi could also be said to be the master of the netherworld. If the Magi moved into the netherworld, they would have the 6 paths of reincarnation, the 12 ancestors of the Magi, and the experts of the Magi. The Een Court was the true Een Court, and it could completely compete with the Heavenly Court. Perhaps this was the beginning of the change in the fate of the primordial world. Wait, the Magi, the netherworld. Thinking of the relationship between the Magi and the netherworld. Feng Zichin's mind suddenly stirred as he discovered a shocking secret. The netherworld was the holy land of ghost cultivators. The 9 underworlds, Qi, could temper the primordial spirit, living in the nether realm for a long time. Even if one did not cultivate much, under the influence of the 9 underworlds Qi, one's origin spirit would slowly become stronger. However, the sorcerer tribe did not have primordial spirits. No, it was not that the Magi did not have primordial spirits. It was just that his primordial spirit was too weak. In the process of cultivation, it was absorbed by his powerful physical body and became a part of his body. If the shamans were allowed to live in the nether realm, it was hard to say what would happen to those powerful shamans. However, there was a high chance that the newborn Magi would be baptized by the 9 nether Qi and give birth to essence souls. They would be no different from other living beings in the primordial world. This, thinking about it carefully, the birth of the netherworld seemed to have been specially prepared for the shaman tribe to make up for the shaman tribe's flaws. Otherwise, why did the shamans benefit the most? If that's the case, it's not unreasonable. The Magi are the descendants of Pangu after all. It's only natural that they take care of them. It was human nature to leave some benefits for their descendants. If it was Feng Zichin, he would do the same. There was nothing incomprehensible about it. The Magi worshipped Pangu, and their attitude towards him far exceeded that of the 3 pure ones, who were also descendants of Pangu. It was normal for Pangu to be biased towards them. Unfortunately, although Pangu's plan was good, he miscalculated. If the nether realm could be born together with the heaven realm, the Magi would have long become the main characters of the world. But it's too late to be born now. Thinking of the ending of the Magi in the future, Feng Zichin was silent for a moment. Even someone as strong as Pangu could not control everything in the primordial world. There were times when he was helpless, using the nether realm to make up for the flaws of the Magi, so that the Magi could become the main characters of the world and dominate the primordial world. Their relationship would not be in vain. However, plans could not keep up with changes. Something that Pangu could not control happened. Reincarnation. It was too powerful. As a result, its gestation time far exceeded Panga's expectations. Even when it was the age of the Magi, there were no signs of its birth. Reincarnation did not appear for a long time, dragging down the timing of the Netherrealm's birth, causing it to be unable to be born. Helpless, Pangu could only use the power of the Lady of Earth to forcefully create reincarnation. But at this moment, the fate of the Magi was set. They would definitely be defeated. This was the general trend of the heavenly Tao. How could it be reversed by the Netherrealm? His birth could not change anything. Otherwise, how could the monstrous negative karma accumulated by the Magi and Magi be eliminated? How could the karma with the billions of living beings in the primordial world be resolved? These were the sins of the Magi. If this sin was not punished, how could the heavenly Tao show its fairness? Being impartial was the foundation of the existence of the heavenly Tao, and it was also the foundation of maintaining the order of the world. If this concept was lost, the heavenly Tao would no longer be the heavenly Tao if it had selfish motives. The primordial world would also fall into chaos because of this. Therefore, if they were guilty, they had to be punished. Even saints were no exception, not to mention the Magi and demons. If the Magi and demons were not punished, it was not enough to correct the heavenly law, not enough to anger the commoners, and not enough to show the fairness of the heavenly Tao. The Magi had to be punished. They had to pay the price for everything they had done. It was precisely because he understood this principle that Feng Zichen, who was determined to change the primordial world, had no intention of changing the fate of the Magi and demons. Did he not know that as long as he changed the fate of the Magi and demons, the future of the primordial world would definitely change and walk into the unknown? He knew, of course he knew, but he could not do it. The negative karma and karma that the Magi and demons carried was too heavy. Even if it was converted to saints, it was enough to pull them down from their positions as saints. Feng Zichen could not bear such karma at all. He could not solve it, nor did he dare to accept it. If he touched it, he would die. No one in the primordial world could touch it. Sigh. The Magi have already made a big mistake. Their negative karma is deep, and there is no way to save them. Even if the Netherrealm is given to them, they can't change their fate. Therefore, the fate between the Netherrealm and the Magi is limited. That's why Fengdu was born to replace the Magi and rule the Netherrealm. After understanding this, Feng Zichen had a further understanding of the relationship between Fengdu, the Magi, and the Netherrealm. The appearance of the Netherrealm was too late. It was so late that it could not change the fate of its master of destiny, the Magi. Since the fate of the Magi's decline had been set, the Netherrealm could not be without a master. Fengdu was born and used the merit of opening up the ghost path to rule the rise and fall of the Netherrealm. The appearance of the Netherrealm is not completely useless. Perhaps this is the final place for the Magi to settle down. Everything in the world had a chance of survival. The Magi were no exception, and the Netherrealm was the last chance of survival for the Magi. Chapter 370. According to this calculation, when the Netherworld realm appears, the position of the Realm Lord is not fated with me. At this point, Feng Zichen suddenly discovered a cruel fact. His incarnation of Fengdu was born a little early. At this moment, it was not his turn to be the Lord of the Netherworld. The Netherworld was the world that Pangu had prepared for the Magi. Now that the Magi had not lost their destiny, the position of the Lord of the Netherworld naturally belonged to the Magi. It had nothing to do with Fengdu. When the Magi declined and were convicted of the primordial world, it would be the time for Fengdu to appear and take charge of the Netherworld. Now, the Netherworld. It was the Lady of Earth's, the Magi's. In that case, then let him have an era. As if thinking of something, Feng Zichen suddenly laughed out loud. So what if he gave the position of the Lord of the Netherworld to the Magi? How many years could they hold it for? In the end, everything was still his. Moreover, with the Magi ruling the Netherworld, they could help Feng Zichen resist the pressure of the demon race. It was more convenient for him to hide behind the scenes and plan. Compared to the Yin court that Fengdu presided over, the Yin court that the Magi presided over was the real Yin court. It had the power that even the heavenly court could not defeat. Even if in the future, after the Magi calamity, the Yin court could only have 1% of the current Magi strength, it would be enough for Feng Zichen to brag about for the rest of his life. From now on, Fengdu will be the Lord of Hell. He will stay in Hell peacefully and wait for the future development. In an instant, Feng Zichen made a decision in his heart. He would make way for the Magi. If things could not be done, then he would not do it to avoid unexpected variables. As for Fengdu, it was better to be his own Lord of Hell. After the Magi calamity, he would come out to take over the Netherworld and clean up the mess left behind by the Magi. Moreover, staying in Hell and being in close contact with the Magi, he could also give advice to the Magi and increase their future vitality. In this way, it could be considered worthy of his identity as a Magi. In the primordial world, the Chaos Fiend God was a legend. Liches were the unsurpassable pinnacle. Any force that could reach 1% of their strength was enough to dominate the primordial world. If he could reach 1/10 of their strength, then destruction was not far away. After much difficulty, they finally removed the 2 huge mountains that had been pressing down on their heads. How could the saints tolerate the existence of another powerful force like the shaman and demon clan suppressing them? Therefore, if any force had the slightest sign of becoming a force like the Magi and demon clans, what awaited them would be the endless schemes of the saints until they fell apart. The era of the sage. The sage was the supreme being. Their will was the will of the heavens. Even the world had to follow it, let alone all living beings. Forces like the shamans and demons would no longer exist. They were the last glory of the primordial world. After that, they could no longer see each other. However, how could the saints control this world? As the saying goes, as long as the saints were alive, the bandits would not stop. He was the greatest thief in the wilderness. It had been stealing the origin of heaven and earth. To strengthen itself, the weaker the primordial world was, the more disadvantageous it was for all living beings. However, it was more advantageous for the saints, because the weaker it was, the easier it was to control. Only when the origin of the primordial world was constantly weakening and its level was constantly regressing could the saints better control the primordial world and seek benefits for themselves. The saints hoped that the primordial world would continue to weaken. There was no doubt about this. Everything that happened in the later generations had already proved it. During the era of the shamans and demons, the saints were the highest karmic position in the primordial world. They were the peak of the primordial world. Other than that, they did not have many privileges. The primordial world. It was still under the control of the shamans and demons. It did not have much to do with the saints. During the era of the gods, the primordial world was further weakened. The saints became the rulers of the primordial world. Whoever held the karmic position in the world was determined by their will. The primordial world was completely under the control of the saints. After the god investiture, tribulation, the primordial world was shattered again and its level fell. At this moment, the authority of the saints had increased exponentially. Even the heaven and earth tribulation, they were all affected by them. The so-called journey to the West Calamity was like a joke compared to the previous calamities. It was too easy and too simple. It was completely born because of the agreement of the saints. The calamity could be triggered at will. At this moment, the power of the saints could be seen. Speaking of which, although the saints were powerful, they were under the control of the heavenly Tao. They could not be considered free and unfettered. No one would like this feeling of not being able to control themselves. not to mention the saints who had reached the peak of the primordial world. They would definitely think of a way to get rid of the restrictions of the heavenly Tao. If Feng Zichen was in their position, he would do the same. What? I tried my best and worked hard to cultivate to the saint realm. It was so that I could not be affected by 10,000 tribulations. I could do whatever I wanted and be free. In the end, after I became a saint, I realized that under the control of the heavenly Tao, it was true that I could not be affected by 10,000 tribulations. The rest was fake. They did not even have freedom, let alone being free. Who could tolerate this? What was the purpose of their hard work in cultivating? Therefore, they wanted to change and escape from the control of the heavenly Tao. In order to escape from the heavenly axiom, the best way was to weaken its strength. Only when the heavenly Tao weakened would their resistance not be so powerless, and they had the possibility of escaping. Therefore, the primordial world suffered. In order to weaken the heavenly Tao, under the intentional or unintentional calculations of the saints, the primordial world shattered again and again. Before the saints became saints, they might have the determination to develop the primordial world. However, after becoming saints, their hearts must have changed. The feeling of not being able to control oneself was not good. In order to escape for freedom, it was not too difficult to understand that they attacked the primordial world. However, understanding was one thing. This did not mean that Feng Zichen agreed with their actions. Their positions were different. Their perspectives on the problem were naturally different. The saints had indeed benefited from weakening the primordial world. But what about the living beings in the primordial world? When the primordial world retreated, they would be the first to be affected. As the world changed, the cultivation environment became worse and worse. In the past, the celestial immortals who could easily cultivate to become celestial immortals became legends in the future. Such an impact could not be said to be small. Therefore, what right did they have to pay for the benefits that the saints received? This was a great thief, the origin of heaven and earth, the foundation of all living beings. And this was what Feng Zichen wanted to change. The primordial world was the primordial world of all living beings, was not the primordial world of saints. How could he let them take whatever they wanted? Of course, if Feng Zichen wanted to change all of this, he had to at least have the cultivation of primordial chaos Daluo Jinxian to be able to fight against saints. Otherwise, he would be courting death. Therefore, in the future, he still had a long way to go. Chapter 371. After walking through the road to the underworld, crossing the bridge of helplessness, and passing through a vast fog, Feng Zichen finally arrived at the deepest part of the netherworld, where the reincarnation disc was. So powerful! This power can probably easily kill Daluo Jinxian. Before he got close to the reincarnation disc, Hongmeng Daozhong automatically manifested and hung above Feng Zichen's head. Wisps of Hongmeng's aura hung down to protect him. Coming into close contact with the reincarnation disc, the feeling he got was completely different from looking at it from afar. The power was even stronger. Just by coming close to the reincarnation disc, before he could do anything, Feng Zichen felt a fatal crisis. If not for the protection of Hongmeng Daozhong, he would probably be sucked into the reincarnation disc in the next moment and sink into it forever. This, Feng Zichen had never seen such a powerful treasure in his life. It was far beyond his imagination. For a moment, he could not find the right words to describe the greatness of the reincarnation disc. Unfortunately, no matter how good the reincarnation disc was, it was not fated to be with him. It was the treasure of the Hutu. It was a treasure that she had exchanged her life for. I'm really greedy. With a bitter smile, Feng Zichen mobilized the power of his mind and turned it into an invisible sword of wisdom, cutting off all the greed in his heart. Greed. It was his greatest sin. For some reason, When he saw good things, he wanted to stuff them into his pocket. He could not change it. It was really uncomfortable. Perhaps, when he suffered a big setback in the future, there would be a change. Now all he could do was to recite the Tao scriptures from time to time to wipe the spirit platform so that he could maintain his clarity and ensure that he would not be disturbed by greed. After the greed was cut off, when Feng Zichen looked at the reincarnation disc again, there was no more greed in his eyes. There was only endless exploration and curiosity. After thinking for a while, Feng Zichen summoned the merit of creation to add another layer of insurance to himself. Then he took a step forward and continued to walk forward. Since he wanted to comprehend the great Tao of reincarnation, the closer he got, the better. However, the closer he got to the reincarnation disc, the greater the influence of the reincarnation power. Worried that Hongmeng Daozhong could not withstand the pressure of the reincarnation disc, Feng Zichen summoned the merit of creation. It would be funny if he was injured instead of being able to comprehend the reincarnation. The aura of Hongmeng was purple and glowing purple. They enveloped Feng Zichen's body like purple flowing water, making him look extraordinarily luxurious. Before long, Feng Zichen arrived in front of a huge roulette. It was an illusory wheel that didn't have a real body. It was completely composed of laws and runes. Terrifying power of the universe, the universe, the universe, the universe, the universe, universe, and of all things, the of the universe. Extremely terrifying, and its size twos, of God of reincarnation. It was a kind of size that he could not describe at all. If he had to make a comparison, he could only say that the reincarnation disc was bigger than the world tree and smaller than the great Tao. It was between the two and was far bigger than the concept. His power spread throughout the entire void, connecting every place in the primordial world. It was as if everything in the primordial world was under his control. There's no 6 paths? It seems that the 6 paths were not born innately, but were created by Hutu. Walking forward, Feng Zichen looked at the reincarnation disc for a moment. He did not find the legendary 6 paths, so he could not help but speculate. The 6 paths of reincarnation cared about the fate of all living beings in the primordial world and determined their achievements in the next life. It was very important and could not be decided easily. It was normal that it had not appeared yet. According to Feng Zichen's speculation, the so-called 6 paths were the 6 most powerful types in the world. It was with their luck that the reincarnation would evolve further and be more perfect and then be truly born. At the same time, this also deepened the connection between the reincarnation and the primordial world. Reincarnation was the place where life and death operated. It naturally had a close connection with the primordial world. Otherwise, how could the identities of the billions of living beings be arranged? As long as the reincarnation was still in the primordial world, its operation would definitely not be able to bypass the heavenly Tao. That was because all the order of the primordial world and the fate of all living beings were controlled by the heavenly Tao. The heavenly Tao was the supreme ruler of the primordial world. The 6 paths. It was born from the will of the heavenly Tao. That was also a restriction of the heavenly Tao on Hutu, preventing her from controlling reincarnation as she pleased. That restriction was not to snatch the control of the 6 paths of reincarnation from Hutu. Instead, it was to suppress the power of the reincarnation disc at the critical moment and prevent Hutu from unleashing her full power. If not, with the 6 paths of reincarnation disc in hand, how many people in the primordial world would be Huta's match? As long as Huta's strength was suppressed to the level of a saint, the other saints would have a way to deal with her and prevent her from saving the Magi. Feng Zichen could roughly guess what that restriction was. Looking at the other treasures of the netherworld, they could not be used after leaving the netherworld. From this, it was not difficult to deduce the restriction of the heavenly Tao on the 6 paths of reincarnation disc. It was probably the same. The reincarnation disc could not be used after leaving the netherworld. That was in line with the legends of the later generations. In the netherworld, Hutu was invincible. Out of the netherworld, she could not. At most, she was on par with saints, or even inferior to saints. 6 paths! 6 paths! Thinking of the 6 paths of reincarnation, Feng Zichen could not help but fall into deep thought. He wanted to modify the 6 paths, but the 6 paths were set by the heavenly Tao. How could he change it at will? Of course, Feng Zichen wanted to change the 6 paths. That was not because the original 6 paths were disadvantageous to the human race. On the contrary, after the Khanate era ended, the human race was the biggest beneficiary of the 6 paths of reincarnation, other than the Khanate life forms. All the races were proud of reincarnating the human race. The human Tao had almost become the Tao of the human race. Feng Zichen's goal was to change the primordial world. Only changing the 6 paths was the first step to changing the primordial world. If the 6 paths were different, the future direction of the primordial world would definitely be different. But unfortunately, his strength was not enough to change the will of the heavenly Tao. However, he could increase the weight of reincarnation and force the heavenly Tao, or even Pangu, to change the 6 paths rumble. Feng Zichen waved his hand and formed a seal. With the power of the chaos bead, he summoned the world tree from outside the netherworld. Immediately, the world tree broke through the air and descended above the reincarnation. Then, without waiting for the will of the netherworld to react, the roots of the world tree hung down with a bang and tightly entangled with the reincarnation. At the same time, space suddenly shattered and huge cracks appeared, revealing one mysterious world after another. Those were the 3,000 great worlds, the roots of the world tree. They connected the 3,000 great worlds. At this moment, the power of reincarnation rioted. Following those passages, it quickly rushed into the 3,000 great worlds and established a connection with them. Boom, 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 boom. The origin of heaven and earth emerged from the depths of the 3,000 great worlds and surged into the reincarnation, causing his figure to become more solid. Chapter 372. In the sky above the nether realm, the will of the nether realm that had just appeared noticed the scene. After pausing in the air for a moment, it slowly retreated. His duty was to protect the reincarnation wheel and not let it be hurt. But now the actions of the world tree were obviously helping the reincarnation evolve. Not only was it harmless, but it was also beneficial to it, the will of the nether realm. Naturally, he would not interfere in this matter. Buzz, buzz, buzz. At this moment, the entire void suddenly shook. Then, a supreme power descended and enveloped Feng Zichen. Heavenly path. Feng Zichen immediately understood the origin of this power when he felt such a strong, oppressive force. This is, the heavenly path had descended. It was not the first time Feng Zichen had dealt with the heavenly path. Naturally, he was very familiar with his power and would not recognize it wrongly. Obviously, this was the change in reincarnation. It had alarmed the heavenly path, forcing him to descend to the nether realm to check on the situation. However, Feng Zichen obviously did not expect that the commotion caused by the change in reincarnation was not only this. Perhaps the next change was his real purpose. After the heavenly Tao descended, another gaze descended and stared at this place. In an instant, the aura in the nether realm changed. The oppressive feeling brought about by the descent of the heavenly Tao had completely vanished and was replaced by a mighty and vast aura. Buzz. At the same time, the merit of creation in Feng Zichen's body began to tremble violently after this gaze descended. It was as if it wanted to jump out of his body and into the embrace of the owner of the gaze. Pangu. Without a doubt, the owner of this gaze was Pangu. Only he could make the merit of creation so excited. Pangu, who was sleeping in the depths of the primordial world, was alarmed by the change in reincarnation. He deliberately separated a wisp of consciousness to pay attention to this place. Although this strand of consciousness was insignificant, Pangu was still Pangu. His power was unimaginable. Just a strand of consciousness was enough to change everything. Pangu's strength was obviously stronger than the heavenly axiom, but under his majesty, not only did Feng Zichen not feel uncomfortable, he even felt more relaxed. Universal love. Because of Pangu's universal love, therefore, all living beings in the primordial world benefited from it. They were unable to perceive his supreme majesty. However, the heavenly Tao was different. It had to maintain its dignity at all times to let all living beings in the primordial world know that the heavenly Tao was not to be offended. Samsara, the most important place in the untainted land. The heavenly Tao was not the only one paying attention to his situation. Even Pangu was paying attention to him. Therefore, something happened to Samsara. Both of them descended. Good boy. This commotion is simply too frightening. He knew that if there was a problem with Samsara, it would definitely cause a huge commotion. However, Feng Zichen did not expect the heavenly Tao and Pangu to descend together. It was not the first time that he had attracted the attention of the heavenly Tao. He was already used to it. However, this was the first time that he had attracted the attention of Pangu. It was completely out of his expectations. For a moment, Feng Zichen, who had always been bold, could not help but feel a little afraid. He was afraid that Pangu would think that he was meddlesome and teach him a lesson. However, Pangu's consciousness clearly did not have the time to care about Feng Zichen. His attention was all on the reincarnation disc, guiding the connection between the reincarnation disc and the 3,000 great worlds. Be it the reincarnation disc, the 3,000 great worlds, or the world tree, they were all extremely important to the primordial world. They could not be lost. Therefore, Feng Zichen dared to use Samsara to test his plan. With the heavenly Tao backing him up, he was naturally not afraid of anything. Rumble. Under the guidance of Pangu's will, the reincarnation disc operated violently, constantly guiding the origins of the 3,000 great worlds. At the same time, he also separated his own origins from his body and built small reincarnations in those worlds as his own projections to perfect the evolution of the great 1,000 great worlds. After a while, although the origins of the reincarnation disc had increased, the speed of growth was extremely slow and almost undetectable. However, the authority of the reincarnation disc had expanded imperceptibly. Its power was stronger than before. According to the original historical trajectory, the reincarnation disc of the 3,000 great worlds formed a system of its own. It was independent of the primordial world and was not bound by the primordial world's reincarnation disc. However, now, Feng Zichen had used the power of the world tree to forcefully connect the origins of the 3,000 great worlds with the reincarnation disc. He had included their reincarnation into the primordial world's reincarnation disc and controlled it. This undoubtedly greatly increased the potential of the reincarnation disc. However, at the same time, it also increased the difficulty of its birth. In order to let the reincarnation disc be born according to the original timing, the heavenly Tao and Pangu had to appear and personally guide the evolution of the reincarnation disc, this time to prevent any accidents from happening to it. The birth of the reincarnation disc was already late enough. It could not be delayed. During the evolution of the reincarnation disc, all the runes that formed it appeared clearly in front of Feng Zichen, explaining the secrets of the path of reincarnation to him without reservation. Just like that, with the help of the heaven-splitting merit and Hongming Daozhong, Feng Zichen fell into a deep level of enlightenment and comprehended the true meaning of the path of reincarnation. Fortunately, this was the netherworld, and no one could detect his existence. Otherwise, the arrival of the heavenly Tao and Pangas will at the same time would cause a huge commotion. Unknowingly, 10,000 years had passed, and the reincarnation disc gradually returned to calm. Obviously, with the efforts of Panga's will and the heavenly Tao, the evolution of the reincarnation disk was completed. Rumble. In the sky, black and yellow merit descended. It was incomparably resplendent. 80% of it landed on the Tree of World, and 20% landed on Feng Zichen. However, Feng Zichen clearly felt that with the 20% of merit, there was a stern gaze. It glared at him fiercely, almost suffocating him. This was a warning from the heavenly Tao to him, telling him not to mess around like today. This time, connecting the reincarnation disk to the 3,000 great worlds had huge benefits, but there were also huge risks. If he was careless and the reincarnation disk was damaged, the primordial world would suffer great losses. Therefore, this matter was completed successfully and did not cause any great risks. However, the heavenly Tao was frightened. Didn't he see that even Panga's will was alarmed? This was something that had never happened in the primordial world. It could be seen that the impact this time was great. Therefore, the heavenly Tao was naturally very dissatisfied with Feng Zichen, who was the culprit. However, increasing the authority of the reincarnation disk was a merit. No matter what Feng Zichen's purpose was, the result was good. The heavenly Tao had to reward him to show its justice. That was why the merit was bestowed. However, in order to prevent similar things from happening in the future, the heavenly Tao still had to warn Feng Zichen to prevent him from making a big mistake. After all, he would not be so lucky every time. After the heavenly Tao bestowed the merit, it slowly disappeared from the netherworld and returned to the heavenly Tao space. However, Pangu's trace of consciousness remained. He hovered in the air for a moment, then suddenly plunged into the reincarnation disk and disappeared. Seeing this, Feng Zichen could not help but be slightly happy. His plan had succeeded. With this trace of Panga's consciousness, soon after the birth of the reincarnation disk, the one who led the birth of the six paths would no longer be the heavenly Tao, but Panga's consciousness. In Feng Zichen's previous life, the one who led the birth of the six paths was completely the heavenly Tao. As a result, the reincarnation disk created by the Lady of Earth had nothing to do with the Magi. Looking at the six paths, all the races of the primordial world were in it except for the Magi. This was too much. This was not the way to bully others. But now everything had changed. The six paths that were led by Panga's consciousness would definitely be biased towards the Magi, not to mention that they would take all the benefits. But it was also reasonable to leave a reincarnation for them. No matter what, the Magi were his bloodline descendants. He had personally arranged the six paths of reincarnation. It would not make sense if he did not give the Magi some benefits. Thinking about it, without the heavenly Tao, the six paths would definitely change. The future of the primordial world would definitely change. In that case, wouldn't Feng Zichen's goal be achieved? He would even help the Magi along the way. It could be said that he had killed several birds with one stone. And in this matter, the only one who would lose out might be Pangu. After all, it was a good thing for him to be forcefully awakened while he was recuperating from his injuries. It was very likely that it would cause Panga's previous efforts to be in vain. Of course, it was also possible that Feng Zichen was thinking too much. Perhaps a wisp of consciousness was nothing to Pangu. However, if it was really nothing, why didn't Panga's consciousness descend before? Pangu's situation was really puzzling. However, Panga's situation was not something he should worry about. With Panga's realm, his every move had a deep meaning. He would not put himself in danger. Thinking about it, Feng Zichen could not help but feel relieved. He just had to worry about himself. Why did he have to worry about Pangu? This was equivalent to an ordinary worker with a monthly salary of 2,000 yuan worrying about whether the world's richest man would not have enough to eat and wear. It was simply ridiculous. He suddenly relaxed. Feng Zichen suddenly realized that something was wrong. He actually had a connection with the reincarnation disk and could control a trace of his power. Although this bit of power was less than 1% of the reincarnation disk, it was still an extremely powerful force. It could do many things and even interfere with reincarnation through it. His heart skipped a beat. Feng Zichen understood the reason. This was the benefit he obtained from increasing his reincarnation authority through the world tree. With his help, reincarnation had obtained great benefits. Naturally, he had to return the favor and thank Feng Zichen. And this bit of authority was the benefit that the reincarnation disc gave him. Haha. I didn't expect that helping the reincarnation disc evolve would have such benefits. What a pleasant surprise. This matter could be said to be completely out of Feng Zichen's expectations. His heart was naturally filled with joy. Now he might not be able to see the benefits of this bit of authority, but in the future the impact would be great. It would be absolutely convenient to scheme against people. Just as Feng Zichen was happy, a goddess with a sad face was approaching the Nether Blood Sea. Chapter 373. At this moment, Hutu, who had traveled in the primordial world for tens of thousands of years, was finally coming to the Nether Blood Sea. The time for reincarnation and the Nether Realm to be born had arrived. The closer they got to the Nether Blood Sea, the more broken true spirits there were. When Hutu saw them, the sadder her expression became. Hutu, who was deeply affected by the nature of the earth and was known for her kindness, how could she see such a tragic scene? The suffering of all living beings appeared in her eyes. It was like a blunt knife cutting her heart, making her feel extremely uncomfortable. Sadness could not help but surge out from the bottom of her heart. This emotion reached its peak when Hutu arrived at the Nether Blood Sea. In the depths of the Nether Realm, Feng Zichen's merit of creation suddenly shone brightly and sent out a will, urging him to leave this place. Hutu, you're here. Inexplicably, Feng Zichen understood the meaning of the merit of creation. Then, without any hesitation, he turned around and left the Nether Realm, rushing toward Hutu. As Feng Zichen moved, a rain of light danced around him, distorting everything around him. In an instant, he left the Nether Realm and crossed endless space to Hutu's side. That was the power of time and space. After enlightenment, Feng Zichen could not tell how much he had comprehended about the path of reincarnation. However, his comprehension of the path of time and space, the path of life and death, and other great paths related to the path of reincarnation had been greatly improved. He had reached the level of path validation. In other words, as long as Feng Zichen wanted, he could rely on the path of time and space, life and death, and other connate paths at any time. His strength had received an unprecedented improvement. Now, Feng Zichen was waiting for the flower of earth to bloom and his cultivation to take a step forward so that he could reach the perfect realm of Daluo Jingxian and prove the great Taoist priest's path fruit. In this way, even if there were restrictions of heaven and earth, one could not become a sage-to-be without going through the calamity. However, the great Taoist priest's karmic position had its own magic. Its power was endless, and it had invincible divine might below the saint. Such power was enough for Feng Zichen to roam the primordial world. Fellow Taoist Hutu, what brings you here? Walking quickly to Hutu, Feng Zichen asked softly. All of Hutu's attention was focused on the broken true spirits in the Blood Sea. She was thinking about how to save them, so her spiritual senses were at their lowest. In addition, Feng Zichen was not hostile at all, and he came quietly. For a moment, Hutu didn't notice his arrival at all. Therefore, Feng Zichen's voice suddenly sounded in Hutu's ears, which gave her a shock. Ah, fellow Taoist, why are you here? And you came so quietly. You gave me a fright. Hearing that familiar voice, Hutu was startled at first. Then she recovered and couldn't help but complain. As he spoke, he turned to look at Feng Zichen. Fellow Taoist, what are you? With this look, Hutu found that something was wrong. Feng Zichen's appearance had changed, and even his Pangu Dao body, which was envied by the Magi, had disappeared without a trace, leaving only a primordial spirit. But his primordial spirit, how did it come about? Hutu, who was extremely familiar with the path of the god-fiend, naturally knew its drawbacks. That was, it couldn't refine the primordial spirit. This was a technique that specialized in cultivating the true spirit. Therefore, at this moment, Hutu's heart was filled with confusion. If it weren't for the aura of the god-fiend Tao ancestor on Feng Zichen's body that couldn't be faked, she would have suspected the identity of the person in front of her. Fellow Taoist, I'm fine. This is a connate primordial spirit that I refined by chance in the netherworld blood sea. Seeing the confusion in Hutu's eyes, Feng Zichen explained with a smile. Feng Zichen wasn't surprised that Hutu could recognize his identity. The merit of opening heaven could hide from almost everyone in the primordial world, but it couldn't hide from Hutu, because this was her destined master. Besides, Feng Zichen didn't intend to hide the origin of this incarnation in front of Hutu. Otherwise, how could he carry out his follow-up plan? If he wanted to develop in the netherworld, he couldn't avoid the Magi. It was necessary to reveal his identity to Hutu. Fellow Taoist, you're really a genius. Huh? Wait. Just as she was about to express her admiration for Feng Zichen, Hutu realized that something was wrong. The purple brilliance that enveloped Feng Zichen's body seemed to be the merit of opening heaven in her memory. While sucking in a breath of cold air, Hutu fell into her memories and searched for records about the merit of opening heaven in her inherited memories. This aura can't be wrong. That's the merit of opening heaven. But how is this possible? It's been 2 eons since Father opened the sky. How can there still be merit of opening heaven in the primordial world? After a while, Hutu confirmed the identity of the merit of opening heaven, but this made her feel even more incredulous. The merit of opening heaven should have been distributed after the opening of the sky. Why was there still some left? And it was even obtained by Feng Zichen. Fellow Taoist, is the purple light on your body the merit of opening heaven? Hutu was puzzled, so she asked directly. That's right. This is the merit of opening heaven. Back then, when I was traveling in Mount Buzhou, I was favored by the great Taoist priests and obtained some of his inheritances. This 10% of the merit of opening heaven is among them. Feng Zichen nodded and replied. Everyone in the primordial world knew that he had obtained the inheritance of Pangu. Therefore, he said so. There was no problem at all. Hutu wouldn't suspect anything. Of course, Hutu wouldn't suspect anything. After all, in the primordial world, no one had ever heard of anyone who dared to lie in the name of Pangu. Wasn't he afraid that the great god Pangu would blame him? But what they didn't expect was that Feng Zichen dared. Not only did he do it, but he did it more than once. As for the truth of the matter, of course, Feng Zichen wouldn't tell her. Breaking the Hongmeng heaven-measuring ruler was not a glorious thing. It was not easy for Pangu to suppress it. He tried his best to cover it up, but it was too late. How could he spread it out with great fanfare? Wouldn't that be causing trouble for himself? Fellow Taoist, what a good opportunity! With this 10% of the merit of opening heaven, thinking about it, fellow Taoist, you are not far from becoming a saint. Sure enough, after hearing Feng Zichen's explanation, Hutu didn't have the slightest doubt. Instead, she said in an envious tone, becoming a saint was not an exaggeration by Hutu. There was a reason for it. As the descendants of Pangu, the 3 pure ones were all saints and enjoyed supreme glory. However, none of the 12 ancestral shamans had attained the Tao, and their fates were even more miserable. Those who died died, and those who were imprisoned. Their treatment could be said to be worlds apart. The reason was that the 3 pure ones each had 10% of the merit of opening heaven, but the 12 ancestral shamans did not. In the past, in the Purple Cloud Palace, the 3 pure ones had 10% of the merit of opening heaven, and they were directly called saints by Tao ancestor Hongjun. Chapter 374. From then on, everyone in the primordial world knew that 10% of the merit of splitting the heavens could send someone to the position of a saint. Unfortunately, the merit of splitting the heavens had been distributed at the beginning of the splitting of the heavens, and no one could find it. However, they did not expect that Feng Zichen actually had 10% of the merit of splitting the heavens. What a great opportunity! This luck was really enviable. Even Hudu was extremely envious. Now was different from the past. In the past, they could not use the merit and could only integrate it into the luck of the Magi. But now, after obtaining the inheritance of the path of the fiend gods, their true spirits had all kinds of mysteries. They could use the merit to cultivate. Thinking of this, Huda's heart ached even more. If they had obtained the inheritance of the path of the fiend gods earlier, the 20% of the merit of splitting the heavens that Father God had left for them would not have integrated into the luck of the Magi. Instead, it would have created 2 saints for the Magi. In this way, the situation in the primordial world would not be like today, where the Magi and demons were separated. The demon clan had long been destroyed by the Magi. Sigh. It could only be said that fate was playing tricks on them. Fellow Taoist, you must be joking. Hearing Huta's slightly envious voice, Feng Zichen could not help but smile bitterly. How could he not know the effect of the merit of splitting the heavens? If this 10% of the merit of splitting the heavens really belonged to him, he would have long hidden in the chaos outside the heavens to cultivate and come out after becoming a saint. Why did he have to wander around the primordial world all day and risk his life to plot and scheme? His heart was thundering. But unfortunately, this 10% of the merit of splitting the heavens, it was not his. At most, he was a tool, responsible for handing the merit of splitting the heavens to Hutu. Looking at Hutu's envious eyes, Feng Zichen's heart was full of depression. Why are you envious of me? I should be the one envious of you. This is all prepared for you by Pangu. Fellow Taoist, you don't know the inside story. Although the merit of splitting the heavens is with me, it has nothing to do with me. The owner of this treasure is not me, but someone else. After a long while, facing Huda's puzzled gaze, Feng Zichen explained sullenly. Although he had already gotten over the departure of the heaven-splitting merit, he was still a little reluctant when things came to this. This was normal. Even a saint would be tempted by 10% of the merit of creation, let alone him. Although he was reluctant to part with her, as long as his heart wasn't disturbed, it wasn't a big deal. What? What are you talking about, fellow Taoist? The owner of the heaven-splitting merit isn't you. Who is that? In the untainted land, who is more qualified than you to obtain the merit of creation? After Feng Zichen finished speaking, Huta became agitated all of a sudden, as if she was stimulated. Her tone was raised a few octaves. His tone was filled with disbelief. Huta couldn't be blamed. What Feng Zichen said was simply too shocking. In this world, other than Pangu, who else was qualified to obtain the merit of splitting open the heavens? The merit of splitting open the heavens was rewarded to Pangu by the great Tao. Pangu faked his death, so the merit of splitting open the heavens fell on things related to him. But so far in the untainted land, in addition to the 12 ancestral sorcerers and the 3 pure ones, there was also Feng Zichen in the untainted land. But even he was not qualified to obtain the merit of splitting open the heavens. Who else in the untainted land? Could it be that there were other Pangu in the vast, untainted land? Alas! In the past, I didn't know who its owner was. But today, after seeing you here, I understand. I'm afraid that the 10% of the merit of splitting open the heavens was specially prepared for you by Father. With a sigh, Feng Zichen said slowly, Me? What do you mean, fellow Taoist? How does this merit of splitting open the heavens have anything to do with me? Hearing Feng Zichen's words, Hutu was stunned. Why was it related to her all of a sudden? Fellow Taoist, you don't know. When we first met, the merit of splitting open the heavens had a reaction. It wanted to fly out of my body and run to your body, but for some reason it suddenly stopped. Then there was no movement. It was not until 10,000 years ago that I accidentally learned about you from Brother Dijon that the merit of splitting open the heavens had a reaction again and urged me to come to the netherworld blood sea. Today, you just arrived at the blood sea. The merit of splitting open the heavens urged me to come and see you. Isn't it saying that we are fated to meet? After thinking for a while, Feng Zichen said truthfully, there was nothing to hide about this matter. After calculating this matter, the Hutu had gained a huge advantage, and he had suffered a huge loss. If he did not say it in exchange for a favor from the Hutu, wouldn't that be a loss on top of a loss? He would be a fool. Therefore, he had to say it so that the Hutu would know that he had suffered a great loss in this matter, so that she would owe him a favor. It was not Feng Zichen's fault for being too calculative. It was really a great loss. If he did not get back some of his losses, he would suffer for the rest of his life. This, after listening to Feng Zichen's narration, the Hutu suddenly found something different when she looked at the merit of splitting open the heavens. There was suddenly a trace of connection between her and it, as if this thing belonged to her. It could be seen that what Feng Zichen said was not false. However, every time the Hutu tried to call the merit of splitting open the heavens from Feng Zichen through that trace of connection, she always felt that something was missing, causing her to be unable to succeed. Fellow Taoist, this merit of splitting open the heavens is indeed, as you said. It is fated to be with me. It seems that Father God specially prepared it for me. It's just that the opportunity hasn't arrived yet, so I can't take it. It seems that this thing still has to stay with you for a while. After a few fruitless attempts, the Hutu said to Feng Zichen apologetically. The opportunity had not arrived, so she could not force it. The Hutu still understood this principle. The opportunity hasn't arrived? After thinking in his heart, Feng Zichen immediately understood what was going on. Now, the Hutu did not have the determination to transform into reincarnation. If he gave the merit of splitting open the heavens to her now, it was hard to guarantee that she would not return to the Magi race to enter seclusion after receiving the merit and come out after becoming a saint, although this was only a possibility and might not really happen. However, this matter concerned reincarnation, so there could not be any accidents. Therefore, the Hutu wanted to obtain the merit of splitting open the heavens. Only when she was determined to transform into reincarnation could she do so. However, even if Feng Zichen understood this, he did not intend to tell the Hutu. The Hutu transformed into reincarnation. It came from the bottom of his heart. It was his boundless love for all living beings in the primordial world. One had to know that the Hutu's reincarnation was carried out with the mentality of certain death. At that time, he did not know that he could still live after transforming into reincarnation. He, who had already decided to give up everything, no longer cared about life and death. His only thought was to use his own death as the price to exchange for a place to live after everyone died. This was also the Hutu goddess, the reason why she had always been respected. Chapter 375. In the primordial world, there were many people who cared about the common people, but only the Hutu could sacrifice herself for countless people. How could such a person not be respected by generations of people? That was why Feng Zichen could not tell the Hutu about his deduction. The Hutu turned into reincarnation. It was selfless. It was flawless. Therefore, the reincarnation that he created was perfect. If Feng Zichen told the Hutu about his deduction, it would undoubtedly cause the originally sacred action to be tainted with benefits and become less great and pure. Moreover, when it was related to benefits, the Hutu's heart would inevitably have flaws and some selfish desires. Would such a reincarnation still be perfect and flawless? That would also become a stain on the Hutu's life. Reincarnation for the common people and reincarnation for selfish desires were two different concepts. The former was great, while the latter was admirable. The impact was completely different. Originally, the Hutu, who could truly be a saint of the primordial world, would lose the right because of Feng Zichen's words. Her sin would be huge. Therefore, she could not say it. The Hutu turned into reincarnation. That was her own decision and also her greatness. It was the Hutu who used her selflessness to create reincarnation, not reincarnation. The Hutu, the most pangamagus in the primordial world. Fellow Taoist, don't be anxious. If it's yours, it's yours. No one can take it away. Suppressing the thoughts in his heart, Feng Zichen smiled and said, "That tone, that demeanor, could be described as an understatement." It was as if what was about to leave him was not the supreme treasure of the primordial world, the heaven-splitting merit, but some other, worthless trinket. His carefree attitude made Hutu, who was standing at the side, admire him. Honestly speaking, if he were Feng Zichen, knowing that the merit of splitting the sky would abandon him, he would never be able to be so calm and collected. Heartache, that was the least of it. With this comparison, Hutu felt that Feng Zichen was more and more unfathomable. His mental state cultivation was truly high. "You're right, fellow Taoist." Hutu nodded. The merit of creation would be obtained by him sooner or later. So why should he be in a hurry? "That's right. Fellow Taoist, why have you come here?" After a while, Feng Zichen asked with some confusion. However, he took the initiative to change the topic and let the Lady of Earth remember the purpose of his visit and not dwell on the heaven-splitting merit. Reincarnation was his mission here. Compared to that, the heaven-opening merit points were just minor details. Alas! Upon hearing Feng Zichen's words, Hutu recalled the situation of the true spirits in this place. She helplessly sighed and said to Feng Zichen, "Fellow Taoist, you don't know. I've been thinking about traveling to the primordial world. However, on the way, I accidentally discovered that after the living beings of the primordial world died, their true spirits were summoned by an inexplicable force and headed to the same place together. I was curious, so I followed the traces of those true spirits and came to the netherworld blood sea. I didn't expect to see such a miserable scene here. It's really uncomfortable." At this point, the Lady of Earth pointed at the netherworld blood sea. The sadness on her face became even more intense, as if tears could fall at any time. Feng Zichen looked in the direction that the Lady of Earth was pointing at. As he had expected, there were many true spirits inside that were being corroded by the evil aura and were about to sink. If they did not come to the netherworld blood sea, they would not know the misery of the people of the primordial world after their deaths. Everyone in the primordial world knew that most living beings would die. What they had cultivated when they were alive would be transformed into the Tao and completely returned to the world to repay the kindness of the world. However, the physical body and essence soul were formed by the Kanite Chi. After a person died, it would not be long before the Tao disintegrated in the world. However, the Kanite true spirit was different. It was the foundation of living beings. It carried the comprehension of a cultivator's life, as well as the Tao and principles that they had cultivated. If they did not take the initiative to transform into the Tao, it would take a long time for the world to wear them down. Moreover, the higher one's cultivation level, the longer it would take. Therefore, after everyone died, their Kanite true spirits did not return to the world. Instead, they gathered in the netherworld blood sea and waited for everything they carried to be completely destroyed by the world. Only then could these true spirits return to the world. The heavenly Tao needed it. It was the purest Kanite true spirit. Only such a true spirit could strengthen its origin. The Tao comprehensions carried by those true spirits were naturally treasures to other cultivators. However, to the heavenly Tao, they were impurities that would pollute it and affect its perfection and purity. Therefore, it did not take them. However, what kind of place was the netherworld blood sea? Ordinary people would not be able to stand it if they stayed there, let alone true spirits that did not have any protection. Staying in the blood sea would definitely be extremely miserable. Unfortunately, as long as the true spirit did not return to its purity, it would have to stay in the blood sea and suffer for a day. It could be said that it would not be able to rest in peace even if it died. It was because of this scene that the Lady of Earth could not bear to see it. Speaking of which, it made sense. The blood sea was a filthy place. Who would come to a decent person? This also led to the situation of the netherworld blood sea being unknown to many powerful beings in the primordial world. Of course, Taoist Mingi understood. However, with his personality, it was already good enough that he did not have any designs on those true spirits. Why would he help them? Fellow Taoist, people have life and death. Flowers and plants have withered and flourished. The world has birth and death. Such things are all part of the great cycle of heaven and earth. They are the supreme principles of the universe. Outsiders cannot interfere. If you interfere slightly, it will cause a huge change and affect the normal operation of heaven and earth. The result will naturally be to be punished by the heavens. The price of this is not something that we can bear. After thinking for a while, Feng Zichen advised, the matter of transforming reincarnation could not be said by him. It could only be thought of by the Lady of Earth herself. The most he could do was to guide the Lady of Earth's thoughts in this direction. Just like what he was saying now, at first glance it seemed to make sense. However, once one studied it carefully, one would find that there were many loopholes. And these loopholes, the Lady of Earth could tell. Fellow Taoist, you're wrong. Although life and death are the supreme principles of heaven and earth, if you die, you die. Can't you just return to heaven and earth? Why come to the netherworld blood sea and suffer the pain of corrosion? Frowning, the Lady of Earth retorted, the flowers and plants withered. They just returned to the earth. The world was destroyed. They just turned into chaos again. If a person died, they should return to heaven and earth. They should not come to the netherworld blood sea to be tortured before returning to heaven and earth. This matter, it was clearly a flaw in the heavenly Tao. As a result, all living beings were implicated. The countless living beings of the primordial world were innocent. Why did they have to pay the price for the lack of the heavenly Tao? The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. She could not help but curse at the heavens. The heavenly Tao is unfair. With its own mistakes, it implicated all living beings of the primordial world. It forced all the dead of the primordial world to suffer the pain of their true spirits being corroded. It's really detestable. The Lady of Earth was angry. She did not suppress her strength as she cursed, causing her voice to spread throughout the blood sea. The voice was so loud that it caused the void to tremble, forming layers of ripples. It carried the blood water and set off boundless waves in the blood sea. At the same time, a blood-red lightning bolt struck down from the sky, heading straight for the Lady of Earth. However, it seemed to be worried about something. The blood-red lightning's performance was a little hesitant. In the end, it did not strike the Lady of Earth. Instead, it struck the Lady of Earth. One after another, it was exceptionally horrifying. For a moment, on the blood sea, huge waves surged into the sky, and thunder was endless. It was like the end of the world. Fellow Taoist, be careful with your words. As soon as the Lady of Earth finished cursing, Feng Zichen knew that it was not good and hurriedly advised. He was afraid that she would continue to curse and attract the attention of the heavenly Tao at their level of cultivation. Even if they were dissatisfied with the heavenly Tao, they could just curse in their hearts. However, if they cursed out loud, it would be disrespectful to the heavenly Tao and they would suffer retribution. This blood-red lightning bolt was the heavenly Tao's warning to the Lady of Earth. Originally, it was going to hit him, but considering that it was his first offense or considering his identity, it was hit beside him as a warning. However, if the Lady of Earth continued to curse, the heavenly Tao would not care too much. It would strike her down, first to teach her a lesson. The might of the heavens could not be offended. In the primordial world, it was not nonsense. Especially for cultivators of a high realm, it was a wise saying. Just like in the mortal world, a 3-year-old child scolded the emperor and a prime minister scolded the emperor. Could they be the same? The former smiled and passed, but the latter was going to die. So, the higher the cultivation level, the higher the status, the more one had to be careful with their words and actions towards the heavenly Tao, in case he found a reason and specifically targeted him. After all, to the heavenly Tao, Daluo Jingxian had become a parasite of the world. The more there were, the more disadvantageous it was for the development of the world. Daluo Jingxian was the main target of the heavenly Tao's elimination. Every Daluo Jingxian's origin returned to the world after the fall of every Daluo Jingxian, which was greatly beneficial to the heavenly Tao. Therefore, the heavenly Tao would not let go of any opportunity to destroy them. The Lady of Earth's actions just now were equivalent to handing a knife to the heavenly Tao, afraid that he would not attack her. If it were not for the fact that she was worried about reincarnation, she would not have died based on what the Lady of Earth had said just now. However, the heavenly Tao would have to knock down some of her origin. Why? I've already raised you into a great divine ability, and you're still dissatisfied with me? What do you want? This was probably the thought of the heavenly Tao, right? Hee. This is the so-called heavenly Tao is fair. The treatment of the descendants of Pangu is different from others. On the other side of the sea of blood, Taoist Mingi, who saw this scene, was even more dissatisfied with the heavenly Tao. Of course, he did not dare to say it out loud. He only complained in his heart. In this aspect, he had suffered a great loss. Back then, when he established the Azura sect, he had shouted that the heavenly Tao was unfair. He was seriously injured by the heavenly Tao and had to recuperate for a long time before he recovered. But now, the Lady of Earth scolded even more than him, but she was not injured at all. One could imagine how Taoist Mingi felt. I lost my composure. After venting, the Lady of Earth also calmed down. She knew that her reaction was a little too extreme. However, that was all. The Magi did not respect the world, the heavenly Tao or Hongjun. They only worshipped Pangu. They had always regarded themselves as the masters of the primordial world. So how could they take a mere heavenly Tao seriously? This was also the reason why the Magi had no friends in the primordial world. Everyone was a connate god-fiend born in the primordial world. However, the 12 ancestral Magi relied on their status as the descendants of Pangu and insisted on suppressing everyone. Who could tolerate this? If they really wanted to talk about it, which of the connate saints in the primordial world could not be related to Pangu? Moreover, the heavenly courts only managed the primordial world on behalf of the heavenly Tao. The Magi, on the other hand, managed the primordial world in their own name. Being so domineering naturally angered everyone, causing no one to be on good terms with them. Otherwise, it would be easy for the Magi to gather a group of followers with their status as descendants of Pangu. It could be said that the conceit of the Magi was one of the reasons for their decline. They had a good hand, but played it badly. It was referring to the Magi. Fellow Taoist, the moment all living beings were born, they had karma with the primordial world. In addition, everything they experienced in their lives involved countless love and hate entanglements, as well as karma. If all these things do not dissipate and directly return to the world, it will be a burden for the heavenly Tao. Therefore, after everyone dies, they have to come to the netherworld blood sea to dissipate their karma. Seeing that the Lady of Earth had calmed down, Feng Zichen defended the heavenly Tao. This matter, it was not entirely the heavenly Tao's fault. The many great mystical abilities of the primordial world also had a part of the responsibility. It was precisely because the world was imperfect that so many great mystical abilities appeared to help the heavenly Tao perfect the primordial world. Otherwise, How could there be so many opportunities for people to attain the Tao when the world was perfect? Under the suppression of the laws of the world, Tai Jingxian was the peak. As for Daluo Jingxian, it could not be achieved without a supreme opportunity. In the future, although the level of the primordial world had fallen, it was undeniable that the world had become perfect. Perhaps that was also the reason why there were not many experts in the future. The perfection of the primordial world did not only rely on the heavenly Tao, but also the hard work of a group of great mystical abilities. Countless years had passed, but no great mystical abilities had sensed anything amiss with the Blood Sea, or had sensed it but did not want to care. This, therefore, the heavenly Tao could not be blamed for the Blood Sea. Fellow Taoist, you're being unreasonable again. According to you, the time these true spirits stay in the Blood Sea should be based on their negative karma. However, look at the current situation. It's obvious that the time they stay in the Blood Sea is determined by the level of their cultivation level. How can this reflect the fairness of the heavenly Tao? Shaking her head, the Lady of Earth did not agree with Feng Zichen. Ahem. Fellow Taoist, from the standpoint of the heavenly Tao, this is already very fair. After coughing twice, Feng Zichen said, "When cultivators cultivate, they collect the qi of heaven and earth. This is called harming the world to nourish oneself. In the eyes of the heavenly Tao, this is a sin. The stronger one's cultivation level, the more qi of heaven and earth they collect, and the greater their sin. After death, they will naturally stay in the Blood Sea for a longer time. Therefore, there's nothing wrong with that. The Lady of Earth was a human. She had her own views on right and wrong, as well as a heart of good and evil. However, the heavenly Tao was not. It did not have emotions, good or evil or right or wrong. As long as it was beneficial to the world, it would support it. It would oppose anything that was harmful to the world. The heavenly Tao was that simple. Everything would end when one died. It referred to the relationship between humans. When one died, all the grudges and karma from when one was alive would naturally disappear. However, how could the karma with the heavenly Tao be erased by death? It had to be completely wiped out. After the living beings of the primordial world died, the true spirit came to the netherworld Blood Sea to slowly transform into the Tao there to end the karma of the heavenly Tao. However, the Blood Sea was ferocious. That was why these true spirits were tortured here. That was not the original intention of the heavenly Tao. Torturing these true spirits was meaningless to him. Although that's the case, it's an indisputable fact that these true spirits suffered a calamity because the heavenly Tao gathered them in the Blood Sea. The heavenly Tao has to bear the main responsibility for this matter. After hearing Feng Zichen's words, the Lady of Earth understood. The human Tao and the heavenly Tao were ultimately different. However, this matter was created by the heavenly Tao. Of course, because of the mistake of the heavenly Tao, these true spirits have been tortured in the netherworld Blood Sea. They have long accumulated endless resentment. If the heavenly Tao doesn't want to be bitten by the resentment, it has to find a way to resolve this matter. Therefore, fellow Taoist, you don't have to worry. The heavenly Tao will resolve it. This time, Feng Zichen did not refute the Lady of Earth, because what he said was the truth. How can I bear to turn a blind eye to the calamity that befell all living beings? Shaking her head, the Lady of Earth said sadly. However, suddenly her heart skipped a beat. She seemed to have thought of something and hurriedly asked Feng Zichen, "By the way, fellow Taoist, you are a person of great wisdom. Do you have a way to resolve this matter?" The Lady of Earth admired Feng Zichen's wisdom. First, it was the Tao of the God Fiend, then the Connate Sword Tao, and now the Ghost Tao. All of these showed his wisdom. Such a wise person might be able to think of a solution to her problem. This is easy. From now on, if any cultivators die in the primordial world, their true spirits will be shattered. In this way, the speed at which they return to the world will definitely be greatly accelerated. Perhaps, before they reach the netherworld blood sea, they will have completed their Tao transformation. In this way, they won't have to suffer anymore. Feng Zichen said with a light smile. This method was the simplest and most effective, but no one was willing to do it. Fellow Taoist, you really know how to joke. After a long while, the Lady of Earth said helplessly, in the primordial world, countless living beings died every day. If they wanted to shatter their true spirits one by one, even the powerful ones would not be able to take care of it. Moreover, if the true spirit was not destroyed, there would be hope of resurrection. You have no enmity with them, yet you shattered the true spirit of others and cut off their hope of resurrection. This was a great sin. Even the Lady of Earth was unwilling to do it, let alone the other powerful ones. Fellow Taoists, let's go. It's useless for you to worry. Why don't I accompany you to walk in the blood sea and look for an opportunity? The merit of creation asked me to wait for you here. It can be seen that the opportunity between you and him should be here. Fellow Taoist, you are not strong enough now. Thinking about this matter is of no use other than wasting your mind. Why don't you wait until you obtain the merit of creation and become a Saint Karma rank and your strength improves greatly? Then, you can think of a way to solve this matter. At different heights, the way you look at problems is different. Chapter 376. That was enough. It was time to get things back on track. Therefore, Feng Zichen took the initiative to invite Hutu to the depths of the blood sea. This was only the edge of the blood sea. The situation of those true spirits was not too bad. Hutu felt that she could not accept it. If she went to the depths of the nether blood sea and saw the situation there, her reaction would probably be even greater. In the future, Hutu went to the depths of the nether blood sea. When she saw the scene there, her heart was greatly impacted. Only then did she have the idea of turning her body into reincarnation. Now, Feng Zichen brought Hutu to the depths of the blood sea with such an idea. Fellow Taoist is right. With my current cultivation, I really can't think of any good methods. Let's wait until my cultivation is higher. It's just that these true spirits have suffered. With a sigh, Hutu followed Feng Zichen and walked forward. Oh right, fellow Taoist. The name of my incarnation is Fengdu. It's the ancestor of the ghost path, the emperor of all ghosts. You can call me Fengdu in the future. Don't call me a wizard. I have great use for this incarnation. I can't expose it. On the way, Feng Zichen seemed to have thought of something and reminded Hutu. If Hutu accidentally revealed his identity, then he would be in big trouble. Therefore, it was better to tell her in advance. Greetings, fellow Taoist Fengdu. Hutu took a deep look at Feng Zichen, smiled, and said, hiding his identity, sneaking into the nether blood sea, and even opening up the ghost path. It was obvious that he had a big plan. However, Hutu did not ask what the plan was. If she wanted to say, Feng Zichen would have explained before she took the initiative to say it. And now, she only asked him to hide her identity for her. Obviously, she did not want outsiders to know about her plan. Since that was the case, why bother? Thank you, fellow Taoist. From Hutu's words, Feng Zichen understood what she meant and immediately thanked her. Fellow Taoist, you're too polite. We're family. Why are you being so polite? Seeing him being so polite, Hutu said unhappily. Yes, we're a family. Yes, we've been rude. Just like that, the two of them chatted as they walked deeper into the blood sea. As the two continued to go deeper into the blood sea, Hutu's expression was first shocked, and then she fell into silence. It was not until they reached the depths of the blood sea that Hutu's suppressed emotions finally exploded. How could this be? Hutu looked at the blood sea in a daze. Her face was full of disbelief, and there were even tears in her eyes. The true spirit in the depths of the Blood Sea had long been completely corroded by the brutal aura, turning into a blood-red monster that only knew how to kill. They didn't have any intelligence, and they didn't even have any signs of life. They survived by devouring each other. This was an extremely twisted monster. Killing was the only value of their existence. Of course, these were nothing. They were just some ant-like monsters that could be exterminated with a single thought. It wasn't worth it for Hutu to do this. What really moved him was, it was the form of these monsters. They fed on blood and chi, and they could constantly absorb energy from the Blood Sea to strengthen their true spirit. However, the true spirit came to the Blood Sea to dissipate its strength and return to the world. In this way, the true spirit would completely return to the world, and it would become unreachable. Moreover, these true spirits had long been corroded by the brutal aura. If they could not return to the world, they would be tortured by the brutal aura day and night, and they would be in extreme pain. They would have to reincarnate forever. If these monsters did not die, the true spirit in their bodies would be imprisoned in the 18 levels of hell. They would be tortured forever and would have to reincarnate forever. Miserable. How miserable. Hutu was lost and shed tears because of the suffering of these true spirits. What crimes did the common people commit? After muttering to herself, Hutu suddenly used her divine ability. Immediately, the power of creation of the earth surged from all directions and enveloped this place. Sizzle. One could see that as soon as the blood-red monsters came into contact with the power of creation of the earth, they turned into blood-red smoke as if they had met their natural enemy. As for the true spirit in their bodies, it was purified by Hutu's secret technique and turned into the purest innate spiritual light. Empress is merciful. The moment these true spirits were purified, they had a moment of clarity. They bowed to Hutu and turned into specks of light that returned to the world. Empress is merciful. Empress is merciful. Then, every true spirit that was purified regained a moment of clarity just like before. After bowing to Hutu one by one, they explained everything and returned to the world. Rumble. As more and more true spirits were purified, the heavenly Tao sensed it and mysterious yellow merit descended. It was abnormally mystical. However, Hutu did not accept the merit. Instead, she used her divine ability and sent it into the depths of the Blood Sea to continue purifying the true spirits. For a time, the creation chi in the depths of the Blood Sea filled the air and suppressed the bloody aura, turning a peerless, dangerous place into a creation, holy land. Tut! At this moment, a white lotus suddenly floated in the void. It was emitting a clear, holy light. There were 12 grades, and it took root in the Blood Sea. That was the 12th grade world, cleansing white lotus. It was Xianqing was here. The Blood Sea was not far from the west. After Xianqing left Mount Meru, he did not return to the East Sea. Instead, he found a place near the Blood Sea and cultivated, waiting for the birth of reincarnation. Hutu's reincarnation was the greatest opportunity in the primordial world after Pangu opened the sky. If he missed it, he would never be able to find a second one. Thus, how could Xianqing not come and interfere? One had to know that his goal was to become the great emperor of the East Pole. And the great emperor of the East Pole had another identity, the heavenly venerable of seeking sound and saving suffering. This identity was not only for the living, but also for the dead. He could guide the suffering souls to reincarnation, for those who had accumulated virtue and done good deeds, understood the mysteries and achieved great merit. The great emperor of the East Pole could also ride the immortal control of the 9 lions and scatter the auspicious light of 100 treasures to guide them to ascend to the heavens and become immortals. He had the power to save all living beings, save the suffering, educate all living beings, and transcend life and death. If Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva was the representative of Buddhism in the underworld, Then the great emperor of the East Pole was the representative of Tao in the underworld. Corresponding to it, with such an identity, for the sake of his future Tao career, Xianqing had to make a trip, no matter what. Boom! After the white lotus of purification took root in the sea of blood, it suddenly erupted with a shocking brilliance. Strands of divine brilliance bloomed, and the power of purification was vast and mighty, sweeping across everything. In an instant, it was unknown how many true spirits there were. They were purified by the white lotus of purification. In terms of purification, the 12th grade white lotus of purification was the best in the primordial world. Although the Hutu's creation Li was strong, it was still a little inferior to him. Thank you, fellow Taoist. How should I address you? With the help of the white lotus of purification, the pressure on the Hutu was greatly reduced. She took the time to thank Xianqing, who had just appeared. The third-generation disciple of the Celestial Sect of Wonders, Xianqing, greets Ancestral Witch Hutu. Appearing from the void, Xianqing first told his origin, and then praised, "You're right. It's been a long time since I heard the name of Ancestral Witch Hutu's benevolence. Seeing you today, you really live up to your reputation." Unfortunately, at this time, the Hutu had no time to pay attention to Xianqing. It turned out that when she saw that someone was helping, the Hutu suddenly increased her strength. The power of creation surged out, wanting to envelop the entire netherworld blood sea. The Hutu actually planned to purify all the true spirits in the blood sea at once to help them be free. Seeing this scene, the corner of Xianqing's mouth twitched. The Hutu had the cultivation of a perfected quasi-saint. Of course, she could do this. However, he was only Daluo Jinxian. Being able to purify the true spirits in this place was already his limit. He could not help much more. At the same time, he also understood the Hutu's plan. Purifying all the true spirits in the blood sea might not solve the root cause. But this was the only way the Hutu could think of. There was nothing more he could do. The blood sea was boundless. There were countless true spirits in it. Although the Hutu was strong, she also had a limit. It was a little difficult for her to purify all the true spirits in the blood sea by herself. After a while, the Hutu could not hold on any longer. However, she did not intend to give up just like that. She wanted to forcefully activate her origin and continue to purify the true spirits, regardless of the risk of her strength falling. It's already so late. Why hasn't the Hutu comprehended the meaning of reincarnation? Could it be that it's really because of my appearance that things have changed and are heading towards the unknown? At this moment, Feng Zichen could not help but feel a little anxious. If the Hutu really consumed her origin, would she still be able to create reincarnation? And if the Hutu could not create reincarnation as the culprit, she would definitely not have a good ending. The more anxious he was, the faster Feng Zichen's mind spun. In the blink of an eye, he thought of a way. Ancestral wizard Hutu, let the poor way help you. Xianqing suddenly roared and activated the pure white lotus with all his strength. At the same time, Feng Zichen also secretly strengthened the power of the pure white lotus. Hua, 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 a white light flashed, and a large number of lotus flowers suddenly bloomed in the blood sea. They almost covered the center of the blood sea and continued to spread out. After the lotus flowers appeared, they had been circulating between life and death. And with every birth and death of the lotus flowers, some of the hostility was dissipated. Seeing this scene, the Hutu seemed to have understood something and could not help but fall into deep thought. At the same time, her movements also stopped. Seeing this, Feng Zichen could not help but let out a sigh of relief. It was good that she had comprehended something. When the Hutu figured it out, it would be time for her to incarnate into reincarnation. The cycle of birth and death was also a kind of reincarnation. Xianqing had already extinguished the lotus flowers and performed the reincarnation of the lotus flowers to remind the Hutu. At the same time, by doing so, he also ensured that he did not interfere too much with the Hutu. He did not tell the Hutu anything. He only used a supernatural power. The Hutu could comprehend the meaning of reincarnation from it. That was because her talent was amazing. What did it have to do with others? The flowers withered and flourished, the world was destroyed and reborn. This was reincarnation. It was the truth of heaven and earth. It was also the process of the cycle of the universe. Chapter 377. But why, when people died, was there nothing left? Where was the reincarnation that belonged to people? Because the world was incomplete, the reincarnation cycle was incomplete, and all living beings had no chance to turn the wheel of life and death. After death, they had to go to the netherworld blood sea and suffer endless pain. In a trance, the Lady of Earth understood and thought of a way to save the endless true spirits of the blood sea. As long as she set up reincarnation for all living beings and let them have something to rely on after death, this matter could naturally be solved. So this is my destiny. After understanding the key points, the Lady of Earth felt that her spiritual platform was clear and her thoughts were unprecedentedly clear. Even the secrets of heaven that she could not see through before were now revealed in front of her eyes. In an instant, she understood her purpose of coming to the netherworld blood sea, using her body to make up for reincarnation. The reincarnation cycle was incomplete, and all living beings had no reincarnation cycle. Therefore, she, the descendant of Pangu, needed to use her body to make up for it. At this moment, the Lady of Earth's true spirit was operating crazily, and a bright spiritual light erupted. That was the spark of her thoughts. She was in contact with the myriad Tao of heaven and earth to collect information about the reincarnation cycle. Originally, the Magi did not have primordial spirits and could not come into contact with the myriad Tao of heaven and earth. They did not have the ability to deduce the secrets of heaven, let alone collect information from the myriad Tao of heaven and earth. However, after Feng Zichin passed down the path of the God-fiend, the only shortcoming of the Magi was made up for. In other words, the Magi also had the ability that normal cultivators should have, deducing the secrets of heaven. It was not difficult for the current Magi. At this special moment, the Lady of Earth's spiritual perception reached an unprecedented peak. She had deduced all the consequences of the reincarnation cycle. Even she would die, all of them were deduced by the Lady of Earth. This death was the true meaning of death. She would completely cease to exist. She would use everything she had to make up for the reincarnation cycle and disappear forever in the primordial world. The price was not small. Die. I didn't expect that I would become the first great magician to truly die in the primordial world. I would completely disappear. With a self-deprecating smile, the Lady of Earth said with some melancholy. Obviously, even though she knew that she would die, she still did not intend to give up the reincarnation cycle. The Daluo Jinxian would not die if the primordial world was not destroyed. This was the truth that was recognized in the primordial world. However, if the Lady of Earth transformed into reincarnation, she would break this truth and become the first Daluo Jinxian to completely die since the creation of the primordial world. Reincarnation was the most powerful treasure in the untainted land. In order to make it be born, Hutu had to sacrifice everything she had. Complete death. This was a state that countless great magicians feared. However, when he spoke of it, it was so casual, as if the one who was about to die was not him. His carefree attitude was admirable. If the death of a single person in the future of Earth can be exchanged for the peace of the primordial world after death, well then, Hutu is willing. No regrets, no resentment. With great love in her heart, the Lady of Earth had long ignored life and death. She was willing to sacrifice herself for the living beings of the primordial world. However, there was still a hint of hesitation in his heart that made him unable to make up his mind. This hesitation was not because he was worried about his own life, but because of the shaman tribe. He was the ancestor of sorcery. He was one of the 12 ancestral sorcerers of the sorcerer tribe, the ancestral shaman who should have led the shaman tribe to glory. If he died just like that, what would the members of the shaman tribe do? Especially now, the shaman tribe was about to have a decisive battle. If they lost their top-notch combat power, there would definitely be a flaw in the 12 divine wraith formation. In that case, in the war with the demons, the advantage that the shaman tribe had maintained for a long time would disappear. They might even fall into a disadvantage because of this. Then the shaman tribe would be in danger. It was because of this that the Lady of Earth had not made up her mind about whether to transform into reincarnation. If she transformed into reincarnation, she would be facing all living beings in the world, but she would be letting down the shaman tribe that she was born in. The common people were important. The shaman tribe was still important. The Lady of Earth had to weigh it herself. At the side, Feng Zichen also felt the Lady of Earth's dilemma. After thinking for a while, he understood what was going on. However, he did not know how to persuade her. This matter could only be decided by the Lady of Earth. For the sake of the primordial world, the Father God transformed his body into all living beings. As his successor, I should follow his will and prioritize the primordial world. I want to come. This is also what the Father God wants to see. Big Brother and the others will also understand me. After a moment, the Lady of Earth made a decision in her heart. For the primordial world, for all living beings, she could only let down the shaman tribe. Fellow Taoist, please bring this back to the shaman tribe for me. Tell them that I, the Lady of Earth, have let them down. The Lady of Earth forced out a drop of blood essence from her body and handed it to Feng Zichen with a determined expression. This, fellow Taoist, have you really decided? After accepting the Lady of Earth's blood essence, Feng Zichen asked in an inexplicable mood. The Lady of Earth's reincarnation was the greatest change in the primordial world. It was also a sign that the shaman tribulation was coming to an end. After this matter, it would not be long before the demons attacked the humans. As the descendant of the Father God, I will not shirk my duty if the world is lacking. Seeing that Feng Zichen had accepted her blood essence, the Lady of Earth nodded as a final farewell. Then, she took a step forward and walked towards the netherworld. At this point, the location of the netherworld could not be hidden from the Lady of Earth. Big Brother once said, "You can't be a good person in the primordial world. Good people have good karma. It's a joke in the primordial world, because there is no absolute good thing in this world. If you help others, you will naturally harm their interests. In this way, karma will be formed. It will also plant the root of disaster for the future. In the primordial world, the outcome of being a good person is death. Only dead people can be called good people. Therefore, Big Brother often advises us not to be good people. Especially to me, he reminds me in all sorts of ways. But Big Brother didn't expect that today. I still failed to live up to his instructions. I had to be a good person, a great good person, but I don't regret it." As she walked, the Lady of Earth suddenly thought of the past and could not help but cry. She was not crying for all living beings, but for herself. The brothers and sisters who had been together since they were born would never be able to see each other again from now on. And he, even his last farewell, did not do it. Thinking about it was really sad. This time he would lose everything. The primordial world would never hear of it again. Hope. After he left, the Witch clan could be better. Witch clan, goodbye. After taking one last look in the direction of the Panga Hall, the Lady of Earth said resolutely, "Father God." Today, the Witch clan's ancestral witch, Pangu, the Lady of Earth, saw that the world was incomplete and the reincarnation was incomplete. As a result, all living beings could not rest in peace after they died. Therefore, the Lady of Earth is willing to incarnate into reincarnation, to mend the world. As her voice fell, a bright purple light suddenly erupted from the Lady of Earth's body. It was incomparably mysterious and dazzling, and in this purple light his body was also slowly dissolving. Rumble. In the sky, a terrifying majesty filled the air. A pair of purple eyes quietly crossed the void and arrived above the netherworld blood sea, the Lady of Earth. That was the way of the heavens. At this moment he had truly descended. It was not like before when Hazel descended, nor was it with Tao ancestor Hong Jun as a carrier. Instead, it had truly manifested in the world. Obviously, the birth of reincarnation was too important. Even the way of the heavens could not help but descend personally to prevent any accidents. Great! A cold voice came from the way of the heavens, driving an inexplicable power to gather at the Lady of Earth, helping her to evolve the reincarnation. At the same time, in the depths of the netherworld, the reincarnation disk suddenly shook violently, emitting a great suction force, sucking the light ball that the Lady of Earth had turned into. Rumble. After obtaining the origin of the Lady of Earth, the figure of the reincarnation disk became more and more real. Moreover, it seemed to have suddenly gained power. It began to rotate with a rumbling sound, emitting a terrifying suction force that swept across the entire untainted land. In the next moment, after Pango's body transformed into everything, the remaining power between heaven and earth was completely stimulated. It appeared from the void and surged toward the reincarnation disk. The Lady of Earth, the transformation of Panga's blood essence. Using her as a guide, the reincarnation disk summoned the remaining power of Pango in the untainted land to complete the final evolution and be born perfectly. This was also the meaning of the Lady of Earth's reincarnation. Such a big change happened in the netherworld blood sea. Those great mediums of the untainted land. No, it should be said that the entire untainted land was alarmed. What? The Lady of Earth, this is, after waking up from seclusion, the great medium's heart stirred and they understood the cause and effect. Immediately they were shocked. Was the Lady of Earth crazy? She wanted to sacrifice herself to perfect the untainted land. In this world, there was actually such a stupid person. At this moment, after learning of the Lady of Earth's actions, the hearts of the great mediums were filled with absurdity and disbelief. Wasn't it good to be alive? However, while they found it difficult to understand, they could not help but admire the Lady of Earth from the bottom of their hearts. Hundreds of millions of years of bitter cultivation had turned into flowing water in a day, just to perfect the untainted land. This kind of character could only be said to be worthy of the name of Panga's descendant. The Lady of Earth is merciful. After tidying up their robes, the great mediums bowed in the direction of the Lady of Earth with serious faces. In the heavenly court, the demons, including Di-Jun and Tai, were the same. Even the saints were no exception. This matter had nothing to do with their positions. The Lady of Earth had turned her body into reincarnation. This was a great thing for the entire world. As a member of the untainted land, they had all received her favor, so they naturally had to show her. Moreover, after this matter, the untainted land would no longer have the Lady of Earth. So what if they bowed? The Lady of Earth is merciful. After the great mediums, the living beings of the untainted land also bowed in unison. For a time, the untainted land was filled with praises for the Lady of Earth. At this moment, the atmosphere in the Magi was unusually depressing, forming a sharp contrast with the other places in the untainted land. Sigh. Why do you have to do this? Why do you have to do this? In the Panga's hall, the 11 ancestral Magi gathered together. Looking at the Lady of Earth in the sea of blood, they did not know what to say. Unlike others, they, who were also descendants of Pango, could naturally understand the Lady of Earth's actions. However, although they understood, who could accept that their sister, who had been with them for so many years, was suddenly going to be gone? Let's go. Let's go and see our sister for the last time." After a while, the emperor stood up and said, Chapter 378. Remember, see your sister. No one is allowed to cry. Before leaving, Dijiang warned sternly. It's the mission of the wizard tribe to protect the primordial world created by the Father God. It's the honor of the wizard tribe to die for the primordial world. My sister got what she asked for. We should be happy for her, not sad for her. Dijiang suppressed the grief in his heart and said again, Hutu's reincarnation was following in Panga's footsteps. It was the value of the wizard tribe's existence. They should be happy for Hutu. With Dijiang's help, the ancestral wizards arrived outside the Netherblood Sea in the blink of an eye. However, the evolution of the reincarnation had reached a critical moment. The entire Netherblood Sea was enveloped by the power of the Way of Heaven. Except for those who were here from the beginning, no one else could enter. Dijiang and the others were no exception. Sister, why do you have to do this? Outside the Blood Sea, Dijiang looked at Hutu, whose body had completely disappeared. His face was full of sadness. He said that he was happy for Hutu and was not allowed to be sad. But in the face of this scene, who could bear it? Even a heart of stone would melt, let alone the wizard tribe, who was known for their straightforward temperament. Seeing that Hutu was about to disappear, how could Dijiang hold it in? Brother, Hutu is not bitter. I'm willing to die for the primordial world. Seeing Dijiang and the others, Hutu could not help but smile. The last trace of her obsession disappeared, and she integrated into the reincarnation wholeheartedly. It could be seen that under the power of the reincarnation disc, Hutu's innate, indestructible true spirit was constantly becoming illusory. When the true spirit completely disappeared, Hutu would completely disappear. Sister, with a loud roar, Dijiang's heart was filled with powerlessness. At this point, he could not change anything. As Hutu's last obsession disappeared, the speed of the reincarnation disc's evolution accelerated. At the same time, there was a boundless momentum converging here, accelerating the process. The Way of Heaven could not wait any longer. It borrowed the power of the origin of heaven and earth to help Hutu. With the help of Feng Zichen, the reincarnation disc was stronger than before, and the difficulty of evolution naturally increased. Without the help of the origin of heaven and earth, it would take Hutu a long time to complete the cycle of reincarnation by herself. With the help of the heavenly Tao, in just a few years, the evolution of the samsara disc had reached the final juncture. It was only one step away from being born. 6 paths. This was the last step. Poor ones. It was the 6 paths. He only needed to open up the 6 paths. The reincarnation of the primordial world would be complete. Rumble. At this moment, the heavenly Tao moved. A purple brilliance hung down from his body and merged into the reincarnation disc. Was that the origin of the heavenly Tao? He wanted to use this to create the 6 paths. Unfortunately, the samsara had already changed. The person who controlled the 6 Tao was no longer the Tao of heaven, but the god of creation of the untainted land, Pengu. After the essence of the heavenly Tao fused with the wheel of samsara, before the heavenly Tao could do anything, the thought of Pengu, who had disappeared in the wheel of samsara, suddenly appeared. Suddenly, a majestic power filled the air as if it could twist everything. The origin of the heavenly way, which was known as the most powerful force in the untainted land, could not resist at all. It was distorted and changed, becoming part of Panga's thoughts. Whoosh! Whoosh! After Panga's thoughts devoured the origin of the heavenly Tao, they first circled around the wheel of samsara before suddenly rushing into the Lady of Earth's true spirit. The Lady of Earth was enlightened and knew what to do next. Today, I, Pangu, the Lady of Earth, will use my body to transform into reincarnation and perfect the primordial world. Reincarnation has been established. From now on, life and death will be separated. From now on, in the primordial world, anyone whose cultivation level is lower than Daluo Jinqian's can enter reincarnation if their true spirit does not dissipate after death. Judge whether they were good or evil when they were alive. According to their merit and negative karma, they will enter the path of reincarnation and undergo reincarnation again. The Lady of Earth's clear voice reached the ears of every living being in the primordial world. Immediately, they were filled with respect. This was a matter of great mercy. It could relieve them of the pain after death. They could not help but kowtow. Goddess is merciful. Praise the goddess Hutu, the goddess Hutu, the goddess Hutu. At this moment, all living beings in the primordial world were shocked. Previously, they only knew that the Lady of Earth had transformed into reincarnation to complete the world. Of course, it was a good thing to complete the world. However, they did not know what the benefits were. They only saw that even the saints had bowed to the Lady of Earth. That was naturally a great thing. Therefore, they also had to bow to the Lady of Earth. Now, after hearing the Lady of Earth's words, they came to a realization. It turned out that this was reincarnation. It could allow them to live another lifetime. How could this not be exciting? Who would be willing to die in one lifetime? Who would be willing to live forever after death? If they could live another lifetime, they would have more hope of attaining the Tao. A glimmer of hope of transcendence was, of course, excellent. If they could reincarnate again and again, they might be able to achieve a different kind of eternal life. As such, all living beings naturally respected the Lady of Earth, who had opened up the reincarnation for them. However, their thinking was wrong. Reincarnation could allow them to reincarnate, but it was not without a price. The reincarnation cycle of heaven and earth was to retrieve the true spirits of all living beings and make up for their own origins. It was not to increase the strength of all living beings. It was impossible to reincarnate without any price and to reincarnate again and again. All living beings are divided into good and evil. There is a difference in merit, and there is a difference in karma. To show the fairness of reincarnation, I will use my true spirit to establish the 6 paths to distinguish the reincarnation of all living beings. Just as all living beings were bowing to her, the Lady of Earth continued to speak. She wanted to establish the 6 paths of reincarnation to determine the future of all living beings. At this moment, purple Tao runes flowed on the Lady of Earth's body, emitting a great majesty that suppressed the heavenly Tao until it kept retreating. It was abnormally terrifying. That was Panga's power. He was deducing the future and rebuilding the 6 paths. If the world was incomplete, the heavenly Tao would naturally be incomplete. The 6 paths that he had arranged would naturally be imperfect. Therefore, Panga had to correct it. This was a situation that had never happened in his previous life. It was the result of Feng Zichen's risk. The future of the primordial world would change here. Not long after, 6 mysterious runes appeared from the darkness and fell into the Lady of Earth's heart. This is the 6 paths of reincarnation. Without hesitation, the Lady of Earth ignited her remaining connate indestructible true spirit and used the secret technique passed down by Pango to shake the vast chaos outside the realm. She swore to the great Tao. The great Tao is above. Today, Pango, the Lady of Earth, wants to establish the 6 paths of reincarnation for the primordial world. I hope the great Tao will bear witness to it. That's right, it was the great Tao. How could the 6 paths of reincarnation led by Pango be witnessed by the heavenly Tao? Was he worthy? In this world, stronger and nobler than Pango, there was only the great Tao. Moreover, the 6 paths of reincarnation was a treasure of chaos. Without the baptism of chaos and the blessing of the origin of the great Tao, how could it be truly accomplished? Chapter 379. Therefore, the great Tao had to bear witness to the formation of the 6 paths of reincarnation. The first path of the 6 paths of reincarnation, the heavenly Tao, Anyone who has contributed greatly to the world and life can enter this path after death. As soon as Hutu finished speaking, the great Tao sensed something in the depths of the chaos. A beam of purple gold light wrapped around the origin of chaos emerged from the depths of the chaos. It broke through the barriers of heaven and earth, turning into great Tao runes and landing on the reincarnation disc. The violet gold radiance was a strand of the quintessence of the grand Tao, and it possessed supreme profundity. It was a true supreme treasure that was even more precious than primordial violet chi. So long as he could refine it, then the chaos Tao fruit would be within reach. Treasures of the chaos were treasures of the chaos because of the origin of great Tao. That was why they were superior to all spirit treasures. This was the source of their supremacy. If the 6 paths of reincarnation wanted to become a treasure of the chaos, the origin of great Tao was indispensable. That was why Pangu had directed Hutu to swear an oath to the great Tao instead of the heavenly Tao. After all, no matter how strong Pangu was, he couldn't conjure the origin of great Tao. That was something only the great Tao had. The origin of chaos was also a top treasure in the world. Although it couldn't help one become a saint, it could help one reach the origin Tao. It was as precious as Hongming's purple chi. The great Tao runes formed by the two were mysterious and simple, like an ancient Tian character that exuded a boundless aura. As soon as it landed on the reincarnation disc, it underwent a drastic change. Countless runes were born for it, covering the entire void in an extraordinarily dazzling manner. The runes bloomed, vast and unfathomable, surpassing the stars in the heavens. Even the great universe was as weak as a firefly compared to it. Whoosh! A mysterious aura permeated and blended with the heavenly Tao. Then the runes converged like flowing water into a ball with a whoosh. They transformed into a great Tao rune again and merged perfectly with the reincarnation disc. From simplification to complexity, then from complexity to simplicity. This was a cycle that symbolized the simplicity of the great Tao. In an instant, the reincarnation disc suddenly became more solid, and 1/6 of its body appeared. Rumble. A terrifying aura swept out, suppressing the entire untainted land. Humph! So strong! As the pressure swept over, many powerful cultivators couldn't help but feel the urge to test it out. They secretly mobilized their magic power to resist the pressure of reincarnation. Unexpectedly, the pressure was enhanced by the Grand Tao, so its might had long since attained an unimaginable level. All of them were momentarily unable to resist it, and they were shaken to the point of letting out muffled groans and suffering a slight loss. The great mystical abilities might be able to resist, but the living beings of the primordial world could not withstand the pressure of reincarnation. He was forced to kneel on the ground, unable to stand up. At the same time as that oppressive might swept out, an indescribable message appeared in the minds of the living beings, allowing them to understand what the heavenly way was. This heavenly Tao was not the desolate era's heavenly Tao, but the heavenly Tao of man. Upon entering this Tao, one would be a Xiantian life form upon birth. Moreover, one would be a top-tier Xiantian life form, second only to Xiantian fiend gods. It was the birth of pre-celestial Qi, the birth of the essence of heaven and earth. Such creatures all belonged to the Tao of celestials. Their Taoist physiques were naturally formed. They had all 9 orifices opened, and they even had heavenly luck. As long as he did not die, he was destined to become a Tai Jinxian. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was a celestial being. This reincarnation. It's really unbelievable. It can actually change our fate. After learning the function of the heavenly Tao reincarnation, the living beings were first stunned, then ecstatic. In this world, there were many Xiantian fiend gods and countless top-tier Xiantian life forms. However, that was in the past. In the current primordial world, there were more ordinary Xiantian life forms. Top-tier sentient life forms. Heaven and earth rarely gave birth to them. The existing sentient fiend gods and the top-tier sentient life forms that were still alive were like dust compared to the sea of stars when compared to all the living beings in the primordial world. The ratio was too small. The appearance of the heavenly Tao reincarnation gave these ordinary sentient life forms hope to change their fate. As long as they accumulated enough merit, they could go through reincarnation and change their birth. The more noble their background was, the greater the hope of becoming Daluo Jinxian. On the other side, no matter what the living beings of the primordial world thought, the Hutu continued. The second path of the 6 paths of reincarnation, Tao. Anyone who has contributed greatly to all living beings when they were alive can enter this Tao reincarnation after they die. As soon as she finished speaking, in the depths of the chaos, the great Tao once again lowered a wisp of essence, enveloping the essence of chaos and fusing into the reincarnation disk. Immediately, on the reincarnation disk, another great Tao rune appeared. Another 6th of its body had manifested. Tao, the Tao of earth creation. The essence of the mountains and rivers took form. The essence of the earth condensed and was born. Such natural spirits of the world could all belong to the Tao. All such living beings were born with spirit bodies. Their appearances were different, but they were all people who had opened 9 orifices. They had great luck. If there were no disasters or tribulations, they would definitely cultivate a golden immortal Tao fruit. From then on, they would bid farewell to death and live forever. They would live as long as the world. If the divine Tao were to prosper in the future, there would be natural mountain gods, water gods. They would be able to control a divine realm. This was a sentient life form of the upper level, a spiritual seed nurtured by the world. It was a great creation, and it was ominous to kill. The third path of the 6 paths of reincarnation, human Tao. Those who did not do anything in their lives and did not commit any mistakes can enter this Tao reincarnation. With that, another purple light flew over from the chaos and fused into the reincarnation disk, causing its power to increase exponentially. Its body was already half corporeal. Human Tao, the Tao of all living beings, the Tao of life. In the primordial world, regardless of whether they were sentient or postnatal, they were motionless or not. As long as there was a true spirit and a life mark, they belonged to the human Tao. In other words, in the primordial world, all living beings under Daluo Jinxian belonged to the human Tao. Even the flowers and trees were no exception. The living beings of the human Tao did not have the enhancement of their previous lives. The future depended on their own efforts. Hard work might not succeed. However, if they did not work hard, they would definitely not succeed. Of course, the environment of the world was here. Even if the living beings of the human Tao did not work hard, they could still cultivate to become heaven immortals. However, if they wanted to become stronger, it would depend on their own efforts and fate. This was also the last benefit of the primordial world. After the Magi and demon tribulation, the environment of the world would change drastically. It would be difficult for the living beings of the human Tao to cultivate the immortal Tao. The fourth Tao of the 6 paths of reincarnation, the Karma Tao. Those who have sinned against the world and all living beings in their lives and bear negative karma will enter this Tao reincarnation. The origin of the great Tao transformed into Tao runes and flew over. The power of the reincarnation disk increased by a step, revealing 2/3 of it. What? Karma Tao. Hearing this unfamiliar name, Feng Zichen was first shocked, then overjoyed. The 6 paths had really changed. His plan to change the primordial world had succeeded. In Feng Zichen's memory, the original 6 paths of reincarnation were divided into heaven, earth, human, livestock, Azura, hungry ghost. These 6 paths did not have Karma Tao. Chapter 380. Karma Tao, Karma Tao. Those with karma. would sink into this Tao and suffer. Those with merit naturally had to be rewarded. Those with karma naturally had to be punished. Only then could it show that the heavenly Tao and reincarnation were fair. If good people and bad people were treated the same, then who would be willing to do good in the primordial world? And if one lost their kindness, the primordial world would not be far from sinking. In this world, there was a difference between high and low. To put it bluntly, in the primordial world, connate god fiends were nobler than connate life forms. Connate life forms were nobler than postnatal life forms. Speaking further, even if they were in the same clan, there were differences between clansmen. Those with good talent were nobler than those with weak talent. Those with high statuses were nobler than those with low statuses. The difference between people was already destined at birth. And when there was a difference between people, levels would naturally occur. The noblest, high and mighty. The lowest of them all was as low as the soil. Just like slaves, they enjoyed the worst treatment, but they did the most bitter, tiring, and dirty work. They were also despised, beaten, and scolded by others. They could be said to be tortured. It was as if they had come to the world to be tortured. No, it was not like. That was clearly the case. They had come to the human world to suffer, because they had come on their own. They were plagued by negative karma when they were alive. They still wanted to write it off after they died. How was that possible? After those with negative karma died, they had to go to hell and suffer all kinds of torture to offset their negative karma. After that, they could go to reincarnation. This reincarnation was, of course, the karma Tao. Just because the negative karma was gone did not mean that the sins were gone. The suffering of the death realm was over. The suffering of the life realm was still waiting for them. Otherwise, who would be the lowest? They could not let those who had not done anything, right? They did not make any mistakes, so why should they? Moreover, this way. How could they show the fairness of the heavenly Tao and reincarnation? Therefore, it was better to let these people with negative karma go. This way, not only could it show the fairness of reincarnation, but it could also teach them a lesson so that they would not dare to do evil in the future. It could also warn all living beings in the primordial world to take this as a warning. It could be said to be killing several birds with one stone. What? Path of karma. This, once the karmic Tao was established, everyone felt a chill in their hearts. It was as if a sharp sword was hanging above their heads, constantly warning them so that they wouldn't dare to do evil. Believe, with the path of karma, the living beings of the primordial world would be much more restrained. In the future, the primordial world would be much more stable. They thought that the appearance of the 6 paths of reincarnation would only bring them benefits and no harm. The birth of the 6 paths of reincarnation was to complete the untainted world, not to help all living beings in the world benefit. The 5th Tao of the 6 paths of reincarnation, Tao of Asura. Those who are tainted with the murderous fate can enter this reincarnation cycle after death. After the path of karma was the path of Asura. Feng Zichin wasn't surprised by the appearance of the realm of Asura. The 6 paths of reincarnation was established in the Nether Blood Sea. His appearance had invaded an unknown amount of the Nether Blood Sea's origin. Taoist Mingi had been staying at home, but disaster had come to him out of nowhere. How could he not be angry? How could the Asura tribe not be resentful when their homeland was destroyed? Therefore, in order to compensate Taoist Mingi, the Asura Tao was going to be established. Moreover, the Asura Tao represented. It wasn't just the Asura tribe. The Asura Tao was also the killing Tao. In the primordial world, there are countless living beings. Among these living beings, either for their natural enemies or for their own interests, wars often broke out, causing the primordial world to be in chaos. At this moment, someone needed to be born with the luck of killing. Kill to stop killing, violence to cure violence. Kill until the primordial world was peaceful. Moreover, there were too many cultivators in the primordial world. it was also a burden for the heaven and earth. It was also very good for some people who were born with the luck of killing to clean up some cultivators for the heavenly Tao to maintain the stability of the primordial world. These people had committed endless sins of killing when they were alive. After death, they naturally had to go to the 18 levels of hell and never be reincarnated. However, as they massacred cultivators wantonly, the pressure of heaven and earth was reduced, and the world was developing in a good direction. According to this calculation, this was meritorious to heaven and earth, and should enter the heavenly Tao. However, massacring cultivators was a great sin to all living beings, and was now in the 18 levels of hell. For these people, the heavenly Tao did not reward. They had lost their hearts of fairness and justice. The human Tao did not punish. They had lost their hearts of protecting all living beings. These two were the foundation of the heavenly Tao and the human Tao in the primordial world. They could not be lost. Therefore, in order not to damage the harmony between the heavenly Tao and the human Tao, the Asura Tao was born to settle these living beings. This, I'm sitting at home, and fortune comes from the sky. At this moment, Taoist Mingi, who was originally unhappy because the Hutu did not greet him and establish the 6 paths of reincarnation in the blood sea, suddenly smiled. The way he looked at the Hutu was no longer filled with hostility, but with surprise. The Hutu had given him a big gift for free. At this moment, if there was a word to describe Taoist Mingi's mood, it would be surprise, an incomparable surprise. In this mood, his good impression of the Hutu in his heart could be said to have reached the extreme. Even his good impression of the Magi had reached the max. With the Asura Tao, the Asura clan's prosperity was just around the corner. As the Asura ancestor, he might be able to use this to glimpse the secrets of the primordial chaos Tao realm. Moreover, these were only the benefits that could be seen. Those benefits that could not be seen might be even greater. The birth of the 6 paths of reincarnation had caused such a huge commotion that even Pengu and the great Tao were alarmed. One could imagine how extraordinary it was. It was not that Taoist Mingi could not recognize the origin of the great Tao and the origin of chaos. He also knew a thing or two about their mysteries. Becoming the Taoist master of the Asura was not far from the primordial chaos Daluo Jinxian. Setting up 5 paths in a row, almost reached the limit of the Hutu. Setting up 6 paths consumed her true spirit. The damage caused to the Hutu by setting up 5 paths could be imagined. Her innate, indestructible, true spirit had completely become illusory, leaving only a thin shadow that was almost invisible. It was obvious that if she set up another path, the Hutu's true spirit would completely disappear. Enough. 5 paths of reincarnation are enough. Sister, stop. Outside the blood sea, the candle dragon suddenly shouted at the Hutu. As the ruler of time and the number 1 sage of the Magi, his wisdom was definitely not to be underestimated. Just now, the moment the Asura Tao was set up, the candle dragon had a feeling and used the path of time to deduce. He suddenly realized that the 5 paths of reincarnation were already very perfect. The good and evil of the primordial world, life and death, retribution, and the endless living beings, everything that he could think of was already included. In this way, this 6th path seemed a little redundant. The 5 paths were already perfect. What was the point of the 6th path? Therefore, the candle dragon came back to his senses and hurriedly said to the Hutu. He persuaded her to give up on opening the 6th path so that he could save her life. Chapter 381. To Daluo Jinxian, as long as his connate, indestructible true spirit was still around, no matter how serious his injuries were, it would be a piece of cake. As time passed, he would eventually recover. Although the current Hutu situation was not optimistic, her true spirit still existed. Even if her true spirit was so weak that it was about to disappear, it still existed. That was hope. As long as she stopped the cycle of reincarnation in time, with the help of the Magi, it would not be long before she could return to the peak and even go further. Sister, stop! There's no need to sacrifice yourself for this. As soon as the candle dragon finished speaking, the group of ancestral Magi reacted and tried to persuade her. Fellow Taoist, the battle of the witch-demon technique is about to begin. For the future of the Magi, you have to prioritize yourself. On the other side, Taoist Mingi thought for a while and tried to persuade her. After receiving such a huge favor from the Hutu, he could not sit back and watch her die. Fellow Taoist, you have made great contributions to the primordial world, but you should not die. Please think twice. At the same time, many great mystical abilities of the primordial world, regardless of whether they were familiar with the Hutu or not, also tried to persuade her. Just as they had said, the Hutu had great merit. If she died just like that, wouldn't it mean that her merit was useless? When it was time to die, even if you had immeasurable merit, you would still die. How could everyone not be disappointed? All along, everyone knew that merit was the greatest protection of the primordial world. As long as one had enough merit, even the saints would not dare to attack them. Even the great divines believed this without a doubt. However, if the Hutu died just like that, it would be enough to overturn everything. Merit was not omnipotent. If the calamity of death really came, it did not matter if one had merit or not. They would all die. Therefore, in order to maintain the importance of merit, the Hutu could not die. Moreover, since the creation of the primordial world, countless battles had erupted. Many Daluo Jinxian had died, and there were even some who had fallen into eternal sleep. However, those who had truly died were all dead. If the Hutu died, it could be said that the Daluo Jinxian would not die. They had agreed that the Daluo Jinxian would not die. Therefore, when everyone did things, they had fewer scruples. But now they were suddenly told that Daluo Jinxian would also die. This caused the group of powerful experts to be shocked, and they all felt fear. Yes, they were afraid. Hutu will die. Then they would also die. Being immortal and indestructible was not truly immortal and indestructible. How could this not be terrifying? With the first one, there would be a second one, a third one, and who could guarantee that he wouldn't be the next one to die? Even those who didn't know Hutu well or had grudges against her spoke out to persuade her, hoping that she wouldn't die. 5. Is it really enough? In the face of everyone's persuasion, Hutu couldn't help but smile bitterly. That's right. The 5 Tao indeed contained everything in the primordial world. But what about the sorcerer tribe? As living beings born from Panga's bloodline, the true spirits of the sorcerer tribe were all created by nature. Once they were born, they were all top-notch innate living beings. They were not weaker than the living beings reincarnated by the heavenly Tao, or even stronger. The sorcerer tribe was too strong. They were so strong that even the 5 paths of reincarnation could not shake the life and death of the sorcerer tribe. The sorcerer tribe had a murderous aura. That murderous aura was the heavenly divine murderous aura that came from Panga's body. It was extremely powerful, even more powerful than the murderous aura on the innate ferocious beasts. Once the murderous aura on the sorcerer tribe's body rose, those with lower cultivation levels than them would not even have the ability to resist. They would sink and die. The true spirits that were reincarnated would probably be blasted into pieces by the murderous aura on their bodies before they could even get close to the sorcerer tribe. In this way, if they couldn't even get close, how could they reincarnate? The 5 paths of reincarnation were useless to the sorcerer tribe. Therefore, Hutu could not stop. She had to continue opening up the reincarnation cycle. Even if she died for it, it did not matter, because she knew the next reincarnation cycle was related to the sorcerer tribe. That was the gift of the Father God. In the reincarnation cycle that originally did not have the sorcerer tribe, He forcefully opened up a reincarnation cycle related to the sorcerer tribe. The heavenly Tao could sit by and watch Hutu's sacrifice. It could even take over the fruits of her sacrifice after her death without giving the sorcerer tribe any benefits. But Pangu would not. He would not let Hutu's sacrifice be in vain. The reincarnation cycle was born. No matter what, he could not lose the benefits of the sorcerer tribe. Hutu has gone, nodding at Dijiang and the others. Hutu's face revealed a determined expression. She owed the sorcerer tribe enough. This time, she would use everything she had left to repay the sorcerer tribe. This was also the only thing she could do when she was alive. Unlike the other great mediums, Hutu, who had completely merged with the reincarnation disc, could clearly sense her strength. At this time, she knew that her death was destined. No matter what, the heavenly Tao would not let her live. The heavenly Tao would not allow a powerful treasure like the 6 paths of reincarnation disc to be controlled by outsiders. It had to be controlled by her personally. Therefore, Hutu had to die. The 6th path of the 6 paths of reincarnation, Sorcerer Path. After Pangu's blood descendants die, they can enter this path of reincarnation. As soon as Hutu finished speaking, the origin of the great Tao flew over with the origin of the chaos. At the same time in Pangu's hall, Pangu's heart also moved and flew toward the 6 paths of reincarnation disc. Boom! As soon as the origin of the great Tao merged with the reincarnation disc, Pangu's heart broke through the air and turned into a ball of purple light that fell into the nascent sorcerer Tao. Immediately, a violent change happened. The entire sorcerer Tao was twisting and undergoing a strange change. The runes that represented the sorcerer Tao were also changing. They became more complicated and profound. This change did not last long. In just a few days, it stopped. A huge purple whirlpool appeared in the sorcerer path, and there were specks of purple light floating in it. The purple vortex was unbelievably huge. It emitted a majestic aura that was no different from Pangu's aura. This was Pangu's heart. He connected to the boundless chaos, to absorb the aura of chaos. He connected to the primordial world, to absorb the essence of heaven and earth. The 2 powers gathered in the purple vortex and turned into purple water droplets. They fell to the bottom of the vortex and gradually formed a purple spirit spring. Pangu's blood, that purple spirit spring, was not a spirit spring. It was clearly Pangu's blood. The aura of chaos gave birth to Pangu, and the essence of heaven and earth was formed by Pangu. These 2 powers that were closely related to Pangu were transformed by Pangu's heart with the support of the origin of the great Tao. They produced a shocking transformation and evolved into the foundation of the sorcerer race, Pangu's blood. In the future, as long as the sorcerer Tao was not destroyed, new sorcerer race could be born endlessly with Pangu's blood. From then on, the sorcerer race would have nothing to worry about. Even if they were defeated, they would not be in danger of being exterminated. There was even hope of revival. Moreover, the changes in the sorcerer Tao were not limited to that. Through the power of heaven and earth, the power of chaos, Pangu's heart, the origin of the great Tao, all kinds of supreme powers combined and evolved. The power of the sorcerer Tao could be said to be the number 1 in the 6 paths. Of course, its power was not limited to that. In the deepest part of the purple vortex, where Pangu's blood gathered, a few purple embryos could be seen forming. Khanate Godfiends. Khanate God-Fiend level sorcerer race. Pangu's blood was highly condensed. Its status in the sorcerer race was second only to top Khanate grand sorcerers like Xing Tian and Ho Yi. Apart from the 12 grand sorcerers born from Pangu's blood essence and the Khanate grand sorcerers born from Pangu's heart, there were 3 ways for the remaining sorcerer race to be born. The first way was for Pangu's heart to absorb the essence of heaven and earth and produce Pangu's blood again to give birth to a new sorcerer race. The sorcerer race born in this way could be compared to connate god-fiends. However, ever since the war between the liches and demons broke out, the sorcerer race had repeatedly used the power of Panga's heart, causing their strength to be insufficient. Such a connate sorcerer race could not be born. The second way was for the 12 grand sorcerers to inject their blood essence into Panga's heart and combine it with Panga's blood to give birth to the sorcerer race. This was the first generation of the sorcerer race and the top connate life forms. The third way was for the sorcerer race to be born from the combination of a man and a woman. The sorcerer race that was born in this way was affected by the cultivation level of their parents. Their aptitude was different, and each generation was weaker than the previous. The strong ones were even comparable to connate god-fiends. The weak ones were only the most ordinary connate life forms. However, the sorcerer race was different from the human race. Giving birth was not as simple as the human race. Even the human race needed 10 months to give birth, let alone the sorcerer race. Having a child every 10,000 years was already considered fast. Moreover, after giving birth, the mother's vitality would be greatly damaged and her cultivation level would regress. The price could be said to be huge. That was also the reason why the sorcerer race was rare and inferior to the demon race. If the sorcerer race's population was 1,000th of the demon race's, the primordial world would have long been theirs. After the birth of the sorcerer path, the mysteries about it automatically appeared in the minds of the sorcerer race. After the death of the sorcerer race, their true spirits would enter the sorcerer path and bathe in Panga's blood to obtain a new life. However, their cultivation level was gone. They had to cultivate from the beginning. At the same time, the sorcerer path could also spontaneously draw power from the chaos to create the innate true spirits and give birth to a new sorcerer race. Believe in the future, every once in a while, there would be a new sorcerer race that would walk out of the sorcerer path to strengthen the sorcerer race. Why bother? Looking at the sorcerer path, Dijiang was a little stunned. Logically speaking, he should be happy about the appearance of the sorcerer path. But when he thought about how the Lady of Earth had exchanged her life for it, his heart was empty and abnormally uncomfortable. He could not be happy at all. There was only a thick sense of sorrow. Compared to Dijiang's complicated emotions, Dijun's emotions were much simpler. Happy. Abnormally happy. Although Dijun felt that it was a pity that the Lady of Earth was about to die, he was more excited. Without an ancestral sorcerer, the sorcerer race's greatest trump card, the 12 divine beings' killing formation that was said to be invincible in the primordial world, was broken just like that. This was definitely a heavy blow to the sorcerer race. It was not an exaggeration to say that their strength had been reduced by half. So what if they had the sorcerer path? He could only provide fresh blood for the sorcerer race, but he could not strengthen the sorcerer race during this period of time. No matter how talented one was, it would take time to grow. Chapter 382. By the time the shamans born from the shaman Tao fully matured, the demons would have long defeated the shamans and unified the primordial world. In fact, in front of the powerful demons, the newborn shamans didn't even have the chance to grow. Rumble. With the establishment of the 6 paths, the evolution of the reincarnation disc was completed. Its form completely turned from illusion to reality and truly manifested. At this moment, the sky of the primordial world suddenly split open. A huge crack appeared, revealing the boundless great chaos of the outer realm. There was an indescribable ball of light there. Endless laws lingered, emitting an aura of perfection, boundless greatness, incomparably vastness, unknown mysteriousness. He was the source of everything, the true essence of everything, and the meaning of everything's existence. He was flawless, not the most perfect, but truly flawless without the slightest flaw. That was the great Tao, the only perfect existence, and also the most powerful existence. The ruler of everything had descended into the primordial world. Boom! An incredible power spread out and swept across the entire primordial world in an instant. Immediately, the world stopped operating and completely returned to its original state. The consciousness of all living beings also fell into a blank state. Only Daluo Jinxian and the living beings above him could remain conscious. However, he could not move his body. Even the saints were the same. Under the majesty of the great Tao, all the powerful beings of the primordial world experienced the feeling of not being able to control their own lives. They could not help but feel a great sense of terror. Powerful, too powerful, not to mention them. Even the entire primordial world could not withstand the attack of the great Tao. Just as everyone was immersed in the power of the great Tao moved. Boundless laws hung down from his body and flowed toward the 6 paths of reincarnation disc, completing the final baptism for it. Whoosh! The laws came and went quickly. In the blink of an eye, they flowed through the 6 paths of reincarnation disc and returned to the great Tao. Thus, the Chaos Supreme Treasure, the 6 paths of reincarnation disc. Only then was it considered complete. The 4th Chaos Supreme Treasure was born. Purple Tao flowers suddenly bloomed in the world. As the petals opened and closed, the truths of the great Tao were hidden within. An intoxicating fragrance spread out, attracting people into the Tao. There were also billions of wisps of chaos chi hanging down, turning into connate origins and fusing into the primordial world, strengthening the origins of the primordial world. This was a phenomenon that the Grand Tao had created to celebrate the birth of the 6 paths of reincarnation, and it possessed boundless profundity. Unfortunately, the creation of the great Tao, not everyone was qualified to see it. Except for Daluo Jinxian, all living creatures in the untainted land had lost their consciousness. They had no chance to witness this great fortune. On the other hand, the heavenly Tao was constantly flickering. It recorded the miracle of the great Tao and waited for it to appear as a top phenomenon of the primordial world in the future. Finally, a wisp of the origin drooped down, and the figure of the great Tao disappeared in the untainted land. The sky also slowly closed. At this moment, no chaos demon gods came to make trouble while the sky was cracked. Obviously, as for the great Tao, the chaos demon god did not dare to act rashly. Not long after the great Tao left, the primordial world returned to normal. 1. As soon as the world returned to normal, Feng Zichen's merit of creation suddenly flew out of his body and went straight to Hutu on the 6 paths of reincarnation. At this moment, Hutu's true spirit was already extremely weak and had begun to collapse. In a few breaths, she would completely disappear from the primordial world. Looking at the merit of creation flying over, Hutu was a little puzzled. She did not know what he was doing here. She had thought that she could become a saint with the merit of creation. She could achieve the Tao fruit that everyone dreamed of. But fate made a fool of people. She had yet to get the merit of creation. She was about to die. Now, what was the use of this merit? Thinking about it, it was really ridiculous. Opening her mouth. Hutu wanted to say something, but her extreme weakness made her unable to speak. She could only watch helplessly as the merit of creation flew towards her. What an incredible thing! An expert of the great perfection of the sage-to-be was so weak that she could not even speak. From this it could be seen that Hutu was indeed a lamp that had run out of oil. Whoosh! With the sound of breaking through the air, at the last moment when Hutu was about to completely collapse, the merit of creation finally arrived and wrapped around her remaining true spirit, preventing it from continuing to collapse. At this moment, the remaining Tao runes of the great Tao had not completely dissipated. Everything that happened here was covered up by this force. Except for Feng Zichen, no one noticed it. The heavenly Tao was the same. Whoosh! Accompanied by a burst of thunder, a rain of blood suddenly fell from the sky. It was incomparably scarlet and carried a strong sense of sadness. Rumble. The earth seemed to have lost something important and began to shake. The entire ground was undulating, and smoke and dust rose up, covering the sky and the sun. Another wave of sadness gushed out from the depths of the earth and filled the mountains and rivers. For a moment, all the flowers withered, and the plants withered, showing signs of decline. The earth seemed to have lost all its vitality all of a sudden. At the same time, a strange figure appeared between heaven and earth, letting out a mournful wail, as if it was crying and cursing something. It was abnormally horrifying. The changes between heaven and earth appeared in the eyes of all living beings so suddenly, causing them to be a little confused. They had no idea what was going on. Why would the heavens and earth suddenly mourn for no reason? It was as if some powerful being had fallen. But then, they understood what had happened. Under the shroud of sadness, all living beings seemed to have lost something in their hearts. They felt empty and could not help but shed tears. Goddess Hutu has fallen! How is that possible? A message appeared in the unseen world, allowing all living beings to know the cause and effect. In order to transform the cycle of reincarnation, the Hutu had sacrificed herself. After a short period of silence, there was a huge commotion. All living beings did not believe that the benevolent goddess Hutu would fall, so they shouted in disbelief. Send fellow Taoist Hutu off. Just as everyone was in disbelief, a loud voice suddenly sounded in the world. It was the great divine ability, users, sending Hutu off. Send goddess Hutu off. Shocked, everyone hurriedly knelt down to send her off. There was also a loud cry that shook the heavens and the earth. Hutu was really dead. The heavens cried for her. The earth mourned for her. The great divine ability, users, sent her off. The common people prostrated themselves in worship. In the netherworld, Hutu's figure had long disappeared. Only a huge wheel was left on the spot, the 6 paths of reincarnation disc. Staring at the 6 paths of reincarnation disc, Feng Zichin suddenly frowned. Where did Hutu go? Others might not know, but he saw it clearly. When Hutu was about to completely disappear, the merit of creation had protected a little of her true spirit from being destroyed. Although it was only a little of her true spirit, to a cultivator at Hutu's level, a little of her true spirit was not much different from all of her true spirit. They both represented existence. Chapter 383. Therefore, the Lady of Earth did not die. However, Feng Zichin looked again and again, but he did not find the true spirit of the Lady of Earth that had been saved by the heaven-splitting merit. In the blink of an eye, the Lady of Earth and the heaven-splitting merit seemed to have disappeared into thin air. They had completely disappeared. It was really strange. What does the heaven-splitting merit mean? Why didn't you revive the Lady of Earth properly? Why did you disappear with her? Feng Zichin, who was waiting for the Lady of Earth to revive and take over the 6 paths of reincarnation, was surprised when he saw that. He was about to receive the results when the main character suddenly disappeared. Wouldn't he be anxious to death? Rumble. Just as Feng Zichin was feeling puzzled, thunder suddenly sounded in the 9 heavens and resounded throughout the primordial world. Auspicious clouds shrouded the area, auspicious aura descended, and resplendent golden light filled the air. The heaven and earth merit had arrived. The 6 paths of reincarnation had made a great contribution to the primordial world. Therefore, the heavenly Tao appeared in the world and bestowed boundless merit. Boundless amounts of merit gathered, seemingly covering the entire sky. Even the radiance of the sun and moon was not as bright as it, being completely overshadowed. The golden light shone down and seemed to have coated the primordial world with a layer of golden light. It was exceptionally dazzling and warm. Merit. So much merit. Oh my God, that's too much. At that moment, everyone in the primordial world was attracted by the merit in the sky. They were in disbelief. Even the great mystical abilities were the same. They looked as if they had never seen the world. It was not their fault for being so shocked. It was just that there was too much merit. It was even more merit than when the 5 saints attained the Tao. Even the merit of Nuwa creating humans and the merit of Tao ancestor Hong, Jun's 3 sermons, were not as much as the merit of the Lady of Earth's reincarnation. It was no exaggeration to say that the merit obtained from the Lady of Earth's reincarnation was the greatest merit since the creation of the primordial world. It was second only to the merit obtained by Pangu when he opened the sky. No matter who obtained so much merit, they would instantly become a saint. Even if there wasn't any Hongmeng purple aura, it didn't matter. Boundless virtue would naturally gather, and the river of fate would change. The will of heaven would descend, and everything would change. Even if one was not destined to be a saint, under the push of merit, Hongmeng's purple clouds would automatically fly over and change all the destinies, turning the impossible into the possible and helping one become a saint. Therefore, the merit of the 9 heavens was no merit in the eyes of the great mediums. It was clearly a shining sage Tao fruit. If he could get it, then in an instant, everyone was tempted. He really wanted to step forward and take the merit into his arms. Unfortunately, as long as one has merit, they all had owners. It was not something that outsiders could covet. Even if its master died, it would be the same. This merit belonged to Hutu. Without Hutu's permission, no matter how extraordinary these great masters were, they couldn't take it. However, Hutu was already dead. It was impossible to get him to speak. Furthermore, if Hutu were still alive, it would be even more impossible for him to give the merit to others. Hutu wasn't a fool. If he didn't keep the merit that could make someone a saint for himself, how could he give it to others? Now, looking at the merit above the 9 heavens, although the great masters were drooling, they had no way to take it. They could only watch helplessly. It was really uncomfortable. F***CK. This merit of splitting the heavens is really unreliable. It had been a long time since Feng Zichen was anxious. He even cursed out loud that he hadn't cursed for a long time. The merit of Hutu's reincarnation was about to fall. However, Hutu didn't appear for a long time. He didn't know where she was taken to by the merit of splitting the heavens. What should he do? If the merit fell, but he couldn't find any trace of Hutu, then the only result was, with the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation disc, he could collect Hutu's remaining aura and use it as a foundation to create a new Hutu to carry the reincarnation merit. But was a Hutu born in this way still Hutu? Did it really have anything to do with Hutu? Therefore, how could Feng Zichen not be anxious when he thought of this? However, it was useless for him to be anxious. It couldn't affect the merit of splitting the heavens at all, nor could it affect the reincarnation merit that was about to fall from the sky. Rumble. The reincarnation merit had been gathering above the 9 heavens for decades. Today there was finally a result. As it rolled, strands of merit drooped down and fell towards the netherworld blood sea. That was not all of the virtue. Instead, it was only a very small portion, about 10%. In the blink of an eye, it crossed layers of void and arrived above the netherworld blood sea. Whoosh! At this moment, the merit suddenly split into 3 and turned into 3 balls of light. They flew towards Feng Zichen, Xianqing, and Taoist Mingi, respectively. This was a reward for the 3 of them. Feng Zichen and Xianqing had once guided Hutu's reincarnation and contributed to the primordial world. Naturally, there was merit to be obtained. A thin trace of merit could be divided from the reincarnation merit. As for Taoist Mingi, he was the master of the netherworld blood sea. The reincarnation was established here. No matter what, he could not be bypassed. Naturally, he had to share some merit with him. The merit obtained by Feng Zichen and the other 2 was nothing compared to the reincarnation merit. However, In the eyes of the living beings of the primordial world, it was still a lot. It could create a sage-to-be. From this, it could be seen that the reincarnation merit was huge. After creating a saint, there would still be some left. Logically speaking, Feng Zichen should be happy with so much merit. However, at this moment, Huda still did not appear. He was really not happy. He was not even in the mood to check the merit that he had just obtained. Under his influence, Xianqing was also not happy. On the other hand, Daoist Mingi was smiling from ear to ear. This time he had benefited greatly. He had sat at home and done nothing, but good things had fallen on his head one after another, directly paving his future path. It could be said that he could look forward to the great path. After laughing for a while, Daoist Mingi seemed to have realized something and hurriedly stopped laughing. No matter how happy he was in his heart, he quickly put on a serious expression. If Hutu had just died, he had received such a great favor from her. It was more or less inappropriate for him to laugh out loud without caring about the atmosphere. He would be despised. Therefore, it was better to keep a low profile. He would talk about happy things in the future. No matter how anxious Feng Zichen was, what should have happened still happened as usual. The merit of reincarnation fell like a canopy, covering the Netherblood Sea and gathering towards the 6 paths of reincarnation disk. Rumble. At the same time, the 6 paths of reincarnation rotated. A terrifying power erupted and swept through the entire primordial world. It collected endless dimensions and captured all the remaining aura of Hutu. One could see that in the center of the 6 paths of reincarnation, an illusory shadow was slowly forming. This figure had a beautiful face and was dressed in a purple palace robe. At a glance, one could tell that she was a peerless goddess. Huta no, it could be said to be Ping Xian. Although her figure and appearance were identical to Huta's, her temperament was worlds apart. Huta's body was filled with a benevolent aura and love for all living beings in the world. That was a character similar to Pengu. Although Ping Xian's body was also filled with a benevolent aura, in her eyes there was only the world and no living beings. Ping Xian was more indifferent than Hutu. This indifference was like the heavenly Tao. It was this point that made Feng Zichen certain that this person was definitely not Hutu. Ping Xian was Ping Xian and Hutu was Hutu. Although they were similar, they were 2 different flowers. Once the cycle of reincarnation was opened, Hutu could no longer restore the witch. This already explained everything. After the 6 paths of reincarnation were opened, the witch of Hutu was gone. The so-called Ping Xian was just a life created by the heavenly Tao using the remaining aura of Hutu. Although she had inherited Huta's memories, she had nothing to do with Hutu. Seeing this, Feng Zichen understood everything. He had figured out everything that he could not figure out in the past. Why did the witch clan, backed by the master of reincarnation, Hutu, slowly decline after the great Magi-Demon War? It turned out that Ping Xian was not Hutu at all. How could she care about the life and death of the witch clan? She was just a life created by the heavenly Tao to control the 6 paths of reincarnation. Her actions were all affected by the heavenly Tao. With the heavenly Tao's hatred for the witch clan, Ping Xian did not attack the witch clan because of the influence of Huta's memories. The moment Ping Xian's figure condensed, the reincarnation merit seemed to have found its owner and immediately swarmed into her body. It was as if Ping Xian would disappear if it was too late. With the help of merit, Ping Xian's figure turned from illusion to reality in a breath. After another breath, Ping Xian grew flesh and blood. She truly had a body. After another breath, Ping Xian was born with a primordial spirit. However, at this moment, Ping Xian was still not a complete living being because she had not given birth to a true spirit. However, it would be soon. With the mystery of merit, it would not be long before she could create a true spirit for Ping Xian. At the side, Feng Zichen quietly watched the unforeseen event happen, his heart filled with coldness. As expected, In the eyes of the heavenly Tao, there were only benefits, as long as it was beneficial to the world. So what if it was a great merit? When it was time to sacrifice, he would not hesitate. Perhaps the saint had discovered this, so he did not hesitate to break free from his control. He was really afraid. He was afraid that one day he would be sacrificed by the heavenly Tao. Huta's body had turned into reincarnation, and she had contributed greatly to the world. But look at what the heavenly Tao had done. After Huta's death, he did not even let go of the merit that she had exchanged her life for. He had created a Hutu for himself to receive the reincarnation merit. He did not leave any for the witch clan. TSK, TSK, TSK. His left hand turned to his right hand. The heavenly Tao had played beautifully. The merit was his, and so was Ping Xan. Giving the merit to Ping Xan was equivalent to obtaining the 6 paths of reincarnation disc, a chaos treasure, without paying any price. It also weakened the strength of the witch clan and sowed the root of the decline of the witch clan. This method was really good. The heavenly Tao was unreliable. If he wanted to obtain good things in the primordial world, he still had to rely on himself. At this moment, Feng Zichen's heart, he had some enlightenment. His desire to become stronger became even more resolute. You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.